Good morning, everyone. As you are making your way to seats, just a time check. We are nearing 8 a.m. So please make your way through the registration tables to grab your name tags and grab a seat, and we will get our meeting started promptly.
I'm Bill Peck from Welcome Stock Farm here in Schuylerville, New York, which is a registered Holstein dairy operation. Our goal here at Welcome Stock Farm is to breed a better cow every day. We put a great emphasis on genetics and genetic advancement. The data collection that's being used to make what are internationally renowned as the most respected source of data in the world comes from the U.S. and the Council on Dairy Cattle Breeding. The data that goes into the National Cooperative Database contributes to each and every one of our dairies in making sound economic decisions every day.
My name's Brent Wickstrom. We're at Wickstrom Jersey Farms in Hillmar, California. We're milking about 2,500 cows here, 4X, 3X, and 2X on a 60-stall rotary. The national database really benefits us because every day we're trying to be more efficient, whether it's milk per cow, feed efficiency, pounds of milk per pounds of intakes. So that database is full of knowledge and data that can be put to our use. So whatever way that can create traits that find efficiencies in cows, amongst any of those opportunities, that will all come back to us at some point in a benefit. Just more tools in our belt to work towards a more efficient herd, more efficient industry. CDCB is an independent, nonprofit organization that has checks along the way. All the data is aggregated and anonymized. Once it gets there to be broken down and processed, how they use it to give data back to the producers, how we can use it.
I'm Joe Engel at Lucky Holsteins. I farm here with my wife Margaret, my brother Matt, and my parents Dennis and Beth. Genomics is really at the base of our business model because we can move really fast. Before genomics, we couldn't accurately find our donors until after they calved the first time and maybe even in subsequent lactations. Now we're identifying that animal in the first month of life. Genomics has raised the bar in our herd because we've improved our consistency so much. We have significantly more animals that are a lot more marketable.
We're here at WinStar Dairy. This is where we milk 700 cows in robots. We also have a farm that's Anderson Dairy that milks about 2,000 cows on a 60-stall rotary. And then where I live is in American Falls, and that's our original farm of Seagull Bay Dairy. Working with the National Cooperator Database helps us so that we can make decisions cow by cow or group by group. We trust the evaluations that are coming, and so we are eager to share our data with the national database to keep the system reliable and have confidence in it. The fact that our evaluations come from an independent third-party organization, I think, leads to more transparency, more confidence in the evaluations that come. It's not only yield traits that we're gaining on, we're getting improved fertility, improved calving ability, we're getting improved wellness. As we bring in hoof health data, milking speed data, those kind of things have real world application on farm.
Every dairy farm should contribute into the National Cooperative Database because that information is economically useful for them from a reliability of the sire side and what sires they're using, but also on the female side. From the genomic database to make better decisions on a daily basis on what heifers you want to raise, which ones you don't, which are going to be most efficient and valuable to you down the road. Without the reliability aspect, we're guessing. There's too many uncontrollables.
More data going in is better. So if you're comfortable with your data being correct and input right, there's no reason to not send it in because it's just going to go into a bigger pool.
Because our herd and others share our data into the national database, the genetic evaluations in the U.S. really are the most trusted, accurate, and consistent genetic evaluations in the world.
Good morning. Let's see. All right, there's my mic. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the 2025 CDCB Industry Meeting. I'm Katie Schmidt. I am the Industry Relations Manager for the Council on Dairy Cattle Breeding, and I will facilitate our meeting this morning and keep us hopefully as close to that printed agenda as we can that's in front of you all. On your tables, you should see activity reports, agendas for this morning, printed materials that align with the video we just played on the screen. That's all connected to the producer awareness campaign that CDCB has been engaged in for the last year. So hopefully you enjoyed watching that to get our morning started. Before we get too far in, I want to welcome to the stage Jay Weicker to give some welcoming remarks. Jay is currently serving as the CDCB board chair. So welcome, Jay.
Thank you, Katie. Good morning and welcome to the 2025 CDCB Industry Meeting. It's nice to see such a large turnout in person. With this excellent weather this week, we're in competition with field work and harvest work going on. So we appreciate that everybody could attend in person. We also want to welcome all of the U.S. and international attendees that couldn't make it to Madison and are joining us virtually today. We hope you're at least in a time zone that will allow you to stay with us for the entirety of the morning. Many people associate CDCB with the triennial evaluations, but CDCB also processes weekly and monthly evaluations. So linking CDCB to each of these evaluation processes is part of the reason we continue to conduct these industry meetings. Also, the more you know about the evaluation system and the way data is managed in a confidential manner, the easier it is for you to feel comfortable contributing data to the evaluation system. And it's data that the evaluation system really depends upon. So genomic evaluations still require a continual flow of new phenotypic data, especially for the non-traditional and newer traits that are not as easy to measure. This industry meeting has become a regular annual event to connect with producers and the allied industry, to provide an overview of some of the research work that is being conducted. Improving evaluation models, validating existing models, and analyzing data on potential new traits keep the CDCB staff and researchers more than busy. This morning, the program will highlight some of the upcoming genetic tools that are being researched for potential development and implementation. Emphasis is given to traits that are interesting for producers to improve efficiency and profitability. As we continue to add traits, we rarely get rid of one. So there's an ongoing discussion about grouping some of these traits, the lower reliability or lower heritability traits, into an index to simplify how the data is presented. And we'd welcome your feedback and comments on that idea. With the increasing number of reproduction management tools and different semen product options, fertility evaluations have been dissected with the intent of making them more robust and to take into account variables that didn't exist when fertility evaluations were first introduced. And I believe Taylor will be speaking to you about that later. And to kind of wrap things up, while beef cross calves are making a sizable contribution to the bottom line for many dairy producers, it's still important to look at new and innovative ways we can make genetic progress to efficiently convert plant material into milk and meat for human consumption. We look forward to your feedback and questions throughout the program and hope you find it interesting and informative. So please get comfortable and enjoy the program. Thank you.
Thanks, Jay. Thank you, Jay. All right, with our welcome under our belts, it feels good. Just a couple housekeeping things as we welcome Joao to the stage. The restrooms in this building are over here. The sign fell down, so I just wanted to make sure I pointed that out for those of you who need that throughout the meeting. Beverages are in the middle. There's snacks out front by the WDE letters. But hopefully, you've gotten that as you've walked in this morning, and you're ready to give some attention to Joao Dur, the CEO of CDCB, since our inception in 2013. So it's great to have him at the helm of our organization still today. And the floor is yours, Joao.
Thank you, Katie. Good morning, everybody. It's unfair because there's so much light here I can't see you. So I'll have to guess your reaction or anything like that. But it's really a pleasure to be here again. Unfortunately, every year it's becoming more difficult to say hi to everybody, like I would like to before we start the program. But so good morning, everybody. So my role here today is to present our annual activity report, which you have in front of you. Those of you that are online will not have it yet, but soon will be in our webpage. And this activity report is self-explanatory. But I will go through some reflection on the year that is just we're just completing now. So when we talk about an annual report or an annual let's say, the reflection about what we have done, the first question is what we were trying to do, what we were set to do at the beginning of last year, what we said that we were going to do. So many things have been planned, and the main ones were basically a producer communication campaign that you have been exposed already with videos, and you have materials in front of you at the table, and you probably heard or saw some articles around. And basically this campaign was a big objective of ours when we started last year. The other one that we would really take it seriously in consideration to develop a data providers incentives campaign. We are working on that. And then we also said that we were going to work on our data ingestion system and data flow. The other topic was we realized that in the long run, CDCB needed to have its own capacity in software development. So that was something that we didn't have before, and we were working basically with external contractors, and we said, well, we have to bring in-house expertise so that is something that we can rely on. And finally, we also said that CDCB was moving naturally into a more serious mentoring role in the research and development in dairy genetics in the US. And this meant we needed to bring more people, we needed to establish really a serious research and development plan for us. And that's what we were really committed to do when we started last year. So what have we done? One thing is what we said that we were going to do, and the other thing is what we really do. So that you will learn much better by reading these materials, but it's important to just highlight some of them. So in terms of the evaluation system is always improving. Even when we don't have a new trait, even we don't have a change in genetic base or a change in the selection index, the system is changing because it's always looking for a more efficient and a more elaborate way to provide you with the results. But this year we did have a 5-year base change, and we did have also an update on the net merit indices to reflect the changes in the economic values of the traits. Also, We had a new trait added to the mix recently, which is milking speed. We were going to learn a little bit more about that from Kristen later on. In terms of genomic services, this happens in the background for some people. The genomic nominators and the genotyping labs are very much aware of what's going on in the genomic services, but the users might not really realize how much work is going on, you know, on all this exchange of data and genotypes and quality control and all that. And this year we did something different than before, which it was to be able to use a new technology for genotyping, which is the low-pass sequencing. So we have validated one of the labs that utilizes that technology, and it took a lot of effort from our team to put together really the science behind how we're going to incorporate this new type of technology. I'm not saying we're going in that direction, that we're going to not use SNPs anymore, like some people implied years ago. No, but it's important that we, as the main hub of genotyping data in the world, we need to be prepared to receive multiple types of data. And this has been an exercise that our team was successful to achieve. And it was a good year, excellent year, 1.6 million new genotypes coming into the database. So we are currently about 11.4 million genotypes in total in the database. And this is not so much to say, oh, we are so successful on that, but this is to say how much responsibility we have, because there's so many people depending on these results. So many cows and bulls being evaluated by our system. So we are very much aware of that. We had 4 new certified genomic nominators included in our group of collaborators, and 3 new certified genotyping labs, most of them abroad, which means the demand for the services is still growing. People are still eager to get US evaluations in their animals wherever they are. And this also increases our responsibility. And this work is also done in, let's say, in the shadows by our team, of genomic team that is really working hard all the time. In terms of outreach, I mean, this, if those of you that have been here 5 or 6 years ago, you can see the difference. The difference that I used to be the organizer. Fortunately for you, I'm not anymore. Now it's Katie and her team, you know. And last year, we already had 400 participants in this meeting, being 240 in person and the rest online. And this year, we're pretty much in the same scale. We also had a meeting with producers in Reno, what we call the producer exchange meeting. And we had about 80 producers participating in that meeting. And it was very interesting input that we received there. It's a different region, different demographics. It's really good for us to go there and have a different conversation than what we have in Madison. So we are glad to be part of that as well. Last year during the World Dairy Expo, we also had a small selected group of leaders that sit together with us in a incentives think tank. So before we look into these incentives that we want to develop a program for, we asked them, okay, what do you think we need to incentivize? What are the problems we have in the way we incentivize data flow in the system and all that? And we received excellent feedback as well. So this is rewarding for us, because that means we have this kind of response from you guys, from the leaders of this industry. You're all together with us trying to make the system better. We also had recently, now in August, 100 collaborators from 30 different organizations participating in our National Cooperative Database workshop, And this is an essential meeting in which we discuss all the things that we're trying to do and trying to achieve and get feedback on that from our collaborators. Our people have been busy with talks all over the world, and also, of course, the campaign that Data Fuels Genetic Improvement is going on very well. In terms of innovative data streams, we continue to invest in key projects that we have for collecting new types of data, the lactation factors project, mobility and hoof health project, also enteric methane emissions and feed efficiency projects. So we are collecting this data to improve the quality of the evaluations. And in terms of research and development, one of the major focus of the group has been single-step GBLUP evaluation. So this is coming soon, and soon I mean maybe end of next year, beginning of 27. But it's going to be a complete change in the methodology that we use for genetic evaluations. But I'll let John talk about that later. Like Jay Weicker already mentioned, reproductive performance have been a priority for us. Calf health was an initiative of the USDA Agile group, and we are close to implementing evaluations for calf health traits. And also we're starting to work on whole genome data, because this is something that we cannot be apart from that, so we are building capacity in that area internally as well. In terms of building capacity, we had a new division created, which is the software development division. So we basically achieved what we set up to do. And in total, we had 10 new staff hired in this past year. And this is not just hiring people for the sake of hiring people. We are really here to provide the right talents and the right let's say, people that can address the needs of the industry. And there's nothing I'm more proud of than our staff. I mean, lately I haven't done very little, because they do everything. I mean, that's my goal in life, you know. Financially, we are doing well as well, 12.5% increase in our revenues. And most of the investment has been done in the infrastructure of the system, in research and development, and also in human resources. So, what did we achieve, and what was the impact? So, we have been strengthening our brand, and we have been reinforcing the global standard reputation that we have, and this is proven by the demand that is also growing all the time. The idea is to maintain also relevance of the products that we have by updating regularly the genetic base, the economic weights on the net merit, and so on and so forth. We had advances in research to ensure modern methodologies like single step, and also the low pass sequencing, and also we are continuously trying to add more value to the portfolio, like, for example, milking speed. We have been make an effort to establish an internal software development quality, so that we can ensure continuity and expansion of our systems. We still have legacy systems to be modernized, and this is very important. And also we had an incentives task force that was formed about the time of this meeting last year, and has been really leading a more extensive review of why, what, who, and how data providers should be incentivized in this industry. So we are advancing on that. We had challenges as well. I mean, not everything works as we expect. So, for example, reproductive performance, we would like to have finished that. Taylor will confirm that later, a year ago. But unfortunately, we have to deal with the reality and the challenges and the changes in the data, the changes in the way reproductive decisions are made at the farm, and all that. And our models have to reflect that. So it has been a challenging project to look into all our reproductive performance evaluations and see how can we improve that and how can we make them more stable, make them more reliable. New data types integration and ingestion is proved to be much more challenging than we anticipated, and that's the price we need to pay. We sometimes have some setbacks, but we are continuing to invest on that area. Modernizing legacy systems involves more than rewriting code. It must be accompanied by the changes in culture and practices by all partners involved. So it's not CDCB going to be dictating how things are going to be. We will have to work together with the industry so that all the data that flows into the system flows in a meaningful way for everybody. We need to be resilient of changes around us that we cannot influence. And there have been a lot of them in this past year. So what can we do? And the best thing we have been able to do is to try to anticipate those changes and be prepared for it. So one of the examples is that when CDCB was formed, we were not supposed to deal with research and development. We were the service branch. But times showed us that we needed to have an assurance that there would be expertise available to develop research and development. And fortunately, we made that call. So now we are prepared to continue the work that before was done mostly by USDA and universities. So what's next? It's not enough to know what needs to be done and be very good at it. I think we kind of know what we need to do, and we are really a very qualified group. My quality is to find the right people to work for CDCB and do the right work. And I think I've been doing that. And so the driving force behind consistent growth is knowing who we are and why we exist. And we have been repeating that over year, who we are, and basically we have three pillars here. We are the stewards of the National Cooperative Database. We are here to facilitate and actually make it possible research for the dairy industry, and we are here to provide genetic evaluations. This is who we are, this is why we exist, and that doesn't change. We just change the way sometimes we have to approach some things of that. And our corporate values and nature, which is something that we inherited by our board, from our board. It's basically a cooperative, science-based culture built on collaboration, transparency, and the pursuit of innovation for the collective good of the dairy sector. So I'm not saying here we did everything perfectly this year, but I'm sure we made progress. We are in a better place than we were last year. And all of that is thanks to you, thanks to our board, thanks to our staff, and most importantly, thanks to our dairy producers that continue to believe in a system that is basically pre-competitive and is here to serve their best interests. So you have a very full program now, much more interesting talks than you just had. And I'm sure at the end of this morning, we will be glad that we came here together and had this opportunity to interact with each other. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Joel. That gets us rolling with our research updates. So as you can tell, the theme of the morning is introducing new tools for genetic progress. And we built the theme around the idea that there's all of this work that's being done within CDCB related to new traits. We've got you all here in Madison. What a great time to talk about them in a very open dialogue. So we will give presenters some time to go through the background of these traits, of the work that's being done, and we encourage you to ask questions. So there are QR codes on your tables. That is how you are going to submit questions via Slido. If you are a hand raiser and would like a microphone, we can make that happen too. But please be aware that we will have time for questions after each of our speakers this morning. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce Dr. Kristen Gaddis. She is going to help us better understand the milking speed trait that just came out in the August evaluation. So Kristen, you're up.
Thank you, Katie. Uh-oh. All right, a little bit shorter. Okay, good morning, everybody. I am really excited to start off this discussion of new genetic tools with you guys, starting off with our most recently introduced trait, which is milking speed. There we go. Okay. So as I started to put this presentation together, and I was thinking about it, what really stood out to me was how this trait is really a story of both collaboration and innovation. And I think that's a really good story to tell as CDCB. So first of all, on the collaboration side, most importantly, the collaboration of our dairy producers being willing to compile this data, contribute it to the database and for research is really the most important thing that made this possible. I'll get to it in a couple of slides, but we also had a milking speed task force, which was composed of members throughout our industry partners, and everyone was putting their heads together to come up with solutions to make this a reality. This research required an agreement between DRMS and USDA Agile that really allowed us to lay the groundwork in the research. And then, last but not least, we always talk about this, but I felt like it was important to mention on this trait as well. We have to coordinate between USDA Agile and CDCB to take that research into a production phase. So then if we look on the innovation side, we knew pretty quickly that a subjective score, similar to what a lot of other countries use for milking speed, just wouldn't work and wouldn't scale to the size we needed to use in the US. So we were going to have to come up with something else. Given that we are coming up with something else, we're going to need new data formats and new infrastructure in order to handle that data. We're going to use, ultimately deciding on individual milkings and durations. We're going to have to store that data somehow. All of this stuff had to be developed in order to make this milking speed evaluation a reality. Okay, so with that little quasi-introduction, I wanted to start off with the basics. What is milking speed, and why would we want to select for it? So at its most basic, milking speed is a measure of milk flow rate. And we can measure that in a number of different ways. We can talk about the duration of time that she takes to milk out. We can talk about the time that it takes for her to reach peak max flow. We can talk about average milk flow. What we decided to use in the US was pounds of milk per minute taken from every single milking throughout a lactation, averaged across that, from days in milk 10 through 305 in a conventional milking system. Essentially, we're not using data at this time from automatic milking systems. So then our next question was, why would we want to select for milking speed? And essentially, it's an opportunity to optimize the parlor efficiency by reducing the time it takes for cows to milk and thereby reducing the labor costs. What we heard from producers and from the industry as a whole was that this trait of milking speed was getting increasing interest, throughout. And so we wanted to go in and investigate what we could do about that. With this knowledge, the CDCB board created the Milking Speed Task Force. And this was formed late in 2021 with representatives, as I said, from many sectors across the industry. Our chair was Dr. Asha Miles from USDA Agile at the time, we also had representation, of course, from CDCB, but also purebred associations, NAAB, the DRPCs, and National DHIA. And when this Milking Speed Task Force was created, the main broad questions that we were posed were, is a milking speed evaluation possible? And if it is possible, what are we going to need to make it a reality? So that brings us to the research going behind these evaluations. With the first meeting of the task force, we had a lot of questions. So how do other countries measure milking speed? We know they do, but how exactly are they doing it? How do we, the US at a national scale, want to define a trait of milking speed? What system effects are influencing milking speed? Are there things like the manufacturer that we need to be aware of and take account of? What biological factors are impacting milking speed? Things like parity and breed. Do those impact the cow's milking speed? Ultimately, what data do we need? And maybe more importantly, what data are available to make this happen? So if you flash back to this time last year, Dr. Asha Miles gave a great presentation about the research going into these evaluations. And the great thing is that she answered pretty much all of these questions in that presentation. Now, if you're like me and you don't remember what you had for breakfast yesterday, you can go to the CDCB YouTube page and relive this presentation in its entirety. But I have the Cliff Notes version for at least our questions at this time. So other countries measuring milk speed. Most other countries, most other breeds, are only using a subjective score. It's usually part of the type classification. How do we define milking speed? So we've decided to define it as pounds of milk per minute. What system effects do we need to account for? Well, we found that we need to account for the milking frequency, the milking session number, and the meter manufacturer. The biological effects that we need to account for are things like parity and breed. So in addition to all of these factors that we need information on, ultimately we need data on individual milking yields and those individual milking durations. We were fortunate to have a research collaboration with DRMS where they compiled over 50 million individual milking records from approximately 300 farms across the US. Now, this was the raw sensor data coming into us. And this data required a lot of editing and cleaning in order to ensure that we have the best data going into the National Genetic Evaluation. And the USDA ADL team spent a lot of time developing and testing these specific constraints that we would need to place on this new source of data. Once we put those editing constraints in, the data going into the August evaluations amounted to over 146,000 cow lactations from about 132,000 cows in 215 herds using 10 different meter manufacturers. The really exciting part of this trait, at least from the geneticist point of view, is it has a really high heritability. So the heritability for milking speed was estimated to be 42%. So if we compare that to something like our production traits, something like milk yield, that heritability is 20%. When we go even further down, we start talking about our functional traits, we're getting down to less than 10%. And what this leads to is that even with a fairly modest data set with 146,000 records, we can get relatively high reliabilities already at the start. So our proven bull reliabilities are averaging 68%, and our young bull average is about 59%. So once the research stage is done, that's not the end of the story by any means. So that research and development has to move on to our operations team. And that's where the trait undergoes lots and lots of testing. So we said that this is the first trait that has used sensor data at CDCB, and it required a new data format to be developed. All of that data format, all of that coming into our system, the DRPCs sending that data, that all has to be tested and verified. These data have to be stored within our existing structure in an infrastructure that works and It doesn't cause anything else to break, and we have to test all of that. Once all that is tested, everything seems to be working as we expect. It has to undergo a full test run with our operations team and get approval from a number of different levels and a number of different groups. Once it gets that green light, it'll move on to an official evaluation. But what I hope we know, sitting in this room, is that Milking Speed did get that ultimate green light, and it was released as an official evaluation in August of 2025. So let's take a look at what those official results look like. The PTAs that you'll see are a Holstein phenotypic average of 7 pounds per minute, and that distribution in the center of the slide is the Milking Speed PTA distribution from August 2025. You'll see our peak is right at about 7. As we move to the right and we get larger values, those are going to be our animals that are faster milkers. They're producing more milk per minute. We move to the left, smaller values, those are going to be our animals that are slower milkers. They're producing less milk per minute. And if we're looking to improve our parlor efficiency, those might be the animals that we are looking at to either not select for the next generation or to remove from the herd. When we looked at the relationship of of milking speed with other traits that we select for, the only significant correlations were with milk yield, and because of that correlation with milk yield, we also saw a relationship with somatic cell score and mastitis resistance. You may also want to know how all these milking speed tools that are available compare. So the first thing that we should note is that milking speed has been available for brown Swiss and milking shorthorn historically, and they will continue to be available for those breeds. However, these evaluations are based on subjective data taken during the type classification. So they have a separate data source, and it will be abbreviated MSP for those specific evaluations. We've also compiled a table that describes a lot of the differentiating factors between some of these milking speed tools that are available. I know this is very small on this table, but you can go check it out on our frequently asked questions page for milking speed. And we also have a trait page for milking speed that has a lot of the just trait-specific characteristics that you can learn more about the trait. So with my last few slides, I wanted to talk about, well, what now? What's next for milking speed? So the U.S. dairy industry now has a new genetic tool to distinguish animals based on their genetic milking speed. We're now able to identify those slow milkers and make some decisions based on that. And given that we don't really want to move the population one way or another, there are no current plans to incorporate milking speed into net merit. It'll remain a separate trait similar to something like gestation length. For future work, I've kind of divided this into kind of our easy opportunity and our more challenging opportunity. Easy, as more data come into the National Cooperator Database, we can expand these evaluations to other non-Holstein breeds. The more challenging step forward is going to expand this work to use automatic milking systems. When we start to look at that, everything gets a little bit more complicated. We have many more factors to consider. The milking frequency then varies on a cow and day basis, as well as the interval in between her milkings. We need to be careful that we appropriately account for that. Currently in the National Cooperator Database, we do have some data available for researching that. We have about 20,000 cow lactations with data from AMS. So before wrapping up, I would be remiss not to acknowledge all of the partners that had a hand in making this evaluation possible. First and foremost, the dairy producers contributing these data, and then also our member sectors and collaborators, specifically DRMS, for compiling the data and making the research possible, and all the members of the Milking Speed Task Force across the industry. USDA Agile led a large portion of the research for this trait, and then CDCB staff had a large role, many members, in making this become possible. If you want to learn more about milking speed, I've compiled a list of resources, either produced by CDCB or some of our partners. These are great references to go check out. These slides will be available and you can follow the links as you care to. And with that, I'd be happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Kristen. We do have a couple of questions for you. Sorry, I'm trying to show up so you can see
There
me.
you are.
Hello. So there are a few questions floating around here. We're going to appropriately distribute them to the correct speaker. So they are not about milking speed right now if you look through the list of questions that are floating around. But milking speed questions for you, Kristen. For milking speed, have you looked at the averages of the flow rate over days in milk to potentially account for this in the model?
Yes, we have. I believe it follows kind of a typical lactation curve. I don't remember why we haven't included that. I'm sure there's a reason that I just can't think of right now, but yeah.
Okay, fair enough. Can cows milk too fast?
I think that's a tricky question. There is some evidence that cows milking too fast may have an increased susceptibility to things like mastitis. So that would be one thing I would be careful of.
And then do you expect to have an impact on behavior from selecting for milking speed?
Ooh. I don't know, I've never actually thought about that, but that is an excellent question.
Yeah, me neither. I thought that was fun. All right, I think that's what we have in here for now. So thank you, Kristen.
Okay, thank
Kristen
you.
will be available for questions later on as well. All right, I'll come up here really quick because we are going to introduce John Cole next to the stage. Dr. Cole is going to talk about calf health traits and how we can use genetic tools to create a healthier calf, which we know carries so much value today on our farms as replacements are tight, and those beef dairy cross calves are so gosh darn valuable. So, John, the stage is yours.
Thank you, Katie, and it's fantastic to be here this morning and to see so many friends and colleagues in the audience. As Joao said, I didn't get to say hello to all of you yet today, but perhaps if I haven't said hi, we'll have the chance to visit after these discussions. So as Katie said, I'm going to present what we're doing today on genomic evaluations related to calf health. And this has been a very substantial collaborative effort between our colleagues at the Animal Genomics Improvement Laboratory, which is part of USDA's Agricultural Research Service, CDCB staff. We've had collaboration with Jeff O'Connell at the University of Maryland, and of course our partnership with the DRPCs and DRMS in particular as the source of data for this. So I'm going to get moving. I'm from the South. I can't talk too fast, but I got to move along or I'll get fussed at for being behind schedule. So really, obviously, it's almost kind of calf health is important. Well, yes, of course it's important. Why is it important? Well, and the traits we're looking at here, which is diarrhea or scours and respiratory disease, account for about 75% of pre-weaning mortality, and respiratory disease accounts for about 50% of post-weaning mortality. So these traits are important because they can help us identify the calves that will stay in the herd and then enter the milking string versus the calves who are likely to exit. And we now see record high prices for dairy replacements, right? This shift towards beef-sired calves has led, and the high use of sexed semen has led to maybe some unanticipated changes, in particular a tighter heifer supply than we've seen in the past. So it's really important that not only that we have these replacement calves, but we keep them in the herd and that they're able to enter the milking stream when they're needed. Now, the way your information comes from dairies to CDCB is through something called Format 6. You don't need to remember that in particular. I just wanted folks to understand that we have a way for the DRPCs to transmit information about health and cow health, calf health, and animal management traits to us. And this is important because if you have the information and you want to share it, there's a way for it to come through. But it does require that you as a dairy producer opt in and give your DRPC permission to send the data to us. And then this lets us match up these health events with pedigree information, lactation information, and reproduction information in the CDCB, in the National Cooperators Database. And there were really two key objectives of this research. The first was to develop genetic evaluations. The second was to do maybe a little bit more academic things to dig into some of the underlying biology. I'm going to talk today about the development of the evaluations. I'm not going to talk about the genomics research looking for genes that are associated with differences in survival, because that work is still in progress. So when we looked at the data available to us, there are two things here. On the figure on your left is showing you the total number of records available for different calf health conditions, aggregated over all of the breeds. And you can see that there are three big peaks. That would be scours, lameness, and respiratory disease. And we broke it out on your right. You'll see we break it out by breed. And you'll see that, there's most of the data are Holstein data. There's a good collection of Jersey data. See, the Holstein data are roughly 80%. The Jersey data are something like 17% of the records available. And so we decided to focus on respiratory disease and scours in Holstein and Jersey calves, because that's the data we had available to work with. Like you'll see, for example, a lot of folks are reporting information about lameness in Holstein calves, not as much in Jersey calves. And so a lot of work, Kristen mentioned the work that goes into developing data edits and data quality standards. A lot of work went into that for the calf health traits as well, right? And so, for example, if we have information about a sick calf, we look in the same herd in the same time period, and we pull out all of their contemporaries, and we assume that they're healthy, right? So we need to know about the contemporaries of the sick animals, because we need to have something to compare the unwell animals to. We only use the first event. So if you tell us 5 times that a calf had scours, we only use the first one. And folks ask us a lot about the cow health traits too. Hey, maybe you should use more. If you have more information, why don't you use it all? We agree that this is something worth exploring, and this summer we had Yijing Gong from University of Wisconsin was one of our summer interns, and she did a lot of work on that problem. The truth is that from sort of a statistical sense, most of the information that's available comes in the first report of the event, but we are looking at the value of using additional events. And then it's also important that we have complete animal ID information about the calves. And so that's not just the calf ID, although of course we need that. We also need sire ID, dam ID, and birth date so that we can match up all of the pedigree information, because that pedigree information is used in the calculation of the breeding values. And if a record does not have a matching sire ID, that record's not usable in the genetic evaluation system. So, we urge you to not only record the calf health information, but, have as complete information as possible about animal ID. So when we look at what's in the National Cooperators Database, sorry, I was lost my train of thought here because I changed a slide and I forgot I put the pie chart in. So as I said, about 80% of our data are from Holstein, about 17% are from Jersey. We code the trait as binary. That's just a fancy way of saying it only has 2 values. An animal is either healthy and they get a score of 100, or they're sick and they get a score of 0. The reason we use those 2 values is just to spread the animals out so that they're far apart, okay? Now, the incidence rates are slightly higher in Jersey than in Holstein. Some folks might say, does that mean that Jersey calves get sick more often than Holstein calves? Not necessarily. It might mean that the folks with Jersey calves are a little more diligent about their data reporting. But if you look at the numbers, they're a little bit higher in Jerseys. And that's true for both diarrhea and respiratory disease. The heritabilities, and Kristen talked about what the heritabilities are, they're a little over 2%, 2.2%, 2.4%. That is in the same general range as the cow health traits and some of the other traits you're familiar with, like fertility traits. So it's not a lot, but remember, if we use genetic selection over a long period of time, we can make a lot of progress. So don't worry about the fact that the heritability for milking speed is really high and the heritability for calf health traits is lower. As much as anything, it's about getting started. So here I just broke the incidence rates out by breed so you can see them compared. The blue bars are the healthy animals in a breed. The maroon or red bars are the affected animals. And you can see they're generally similar if you compare, say, the Holstein incidence rates to across the two groups, Jersey. And then you see we have that third category, which is other breeds. It's relatively small. And here, this figure is simply showing you how these are distributed by age, right? And I don't think this surprises anybody who works with calves. You see in particular, that average on the left for diarrhea incidence, it sort of peaks around the time of weaning, then it tails off. Respiratory disease, you kind of see two peaks. You see a peak shortly after the calves are born, then they do okay, then you see a peak later as there's more stress, again, around weaning, and then it tails off, as they get older. When we compare these results to what other folks have reported, other veterinarians in the literature or other researchers, this is very similar to what we see in other countries and in other breeds. Here, I'm going to go real fast. I'm just showing the distribution of the predicted transmitting abilities, right? These would be the genetic values on the left, and the reliabilities of those evaluations are on the right. And this really just shows us this looks the way we expect it to look. We're comfortable that these results make sense. These are the PTAs and reliabilities for respiratory disease. I'm showing Holstein results here. The results are very similar for Jerseys. How are the calf health traits related to other traits that we already record? Well, to me, this is good news, right? We see a modest genetic relationship of diarrhea and respiratory disease with calf livability. And then we also see that respiratory disease and diarrhea have a modest correlation with each other. This is nice because, and if you look at the other traits that I've sort of grayed out, the correlations are very low. This means that we're getting new information from recording these calf health traits. They're telling us something that we didn't already know from the other traits that we measure. And that's important because it means if we include them in our selection goal, that we're actually able to address something now that we couldn't address in the past. The research has been published. I just want to point this out so folks understand that independent scientists who had nothing to do with this research but who are experts read through what we did. They read through our results. They gave feedback and critiques. We made changes. So it's an independent review of what we did. And after that independent review, they concluded that this work was done in a technically correct sense and it merits being reported in the scientific literature. So you don't have to just take our word for it. Other folks who have no investment or stand to gain nothing from it have also signed off on it. So we're moving towards the end here, so I stay on time. Future work. So where are we now? So I have good news. We've moved through the research phase. This has been great. It's been a really good partnership. We had sort of a pre-production phase that involved the handoff of programs and other materials from USDA to CDCB, and now everything is in the hands of our operations team. So our operations team is reviewing all of the programs to make sure that all the pieces they need are there, and they're preparing to do a complete internal test run from start to finish so that we can make sure the whole pipeline works the way it's supposed to. And we are also, as part of this pre-production, testing and validation phase, we're also coordinating with the dairy records processing centers to make sure that any of the data providers who are interested in participating in the launch of this evaluation have the opportunity to get their data in. And our hope is to introduce these evaluations in April of 2026. I think we're going to meet that goal, and so we're very excited about that. So where are we now? We are going to have national genetic evaluations, genomic evaluations for these 2 calf health traits, and they're going to be based on producer-reported data from the field, right? These evaluations will help us produce healthier calves that will move from birth through the growth phase, and then they will enter the milking string at a higher rate than less healthy calves. So that's going to let you make the most of your investment in your genetics program and your calf program, right? Now, continuous recording of the data are needed. I think we probably always remind folks of this, but I think it's really important. We need folks to keep recording information in their on-farm management systems, and we need those data to keep flowing from the field through the DRPCs to the National Cooperators Database. Again, you as a dairy producer have to opt in. CDCB is not allowed to access your data unless you give permission. And maybe as I wrap up here, I would just like to emphasize this work would not have been possible without the help of our colleagues at USDA. In particular, Dr. Mahesh Nupane led the work at Agile, but there were a number of other folks on that team involved. Kurt Van Tassel, Sajad Togiani. When Dr. Miles was still at Agile, she was involved. Gary Folk, who's an IT specialist there. Dairy records management systems provided the data on which these evaluations are based. So that their collaboration and partnership have been essential for this. And then obviously, ultimately, the data come from you, the dairy producers around the US, and we're grateful for your willingness to put your trust in us and to share your data with us so we can develop tools for the benefit of everyone in the US dairy industry. And I would be happy to answer any questions you might have.
We do have a couple questions. Again, just a friendly reminder, if you have questions, either raise your hand so I can see you or submit them using that QR code that's on your table. But John, for you, question about calf health. Zoetis has an evaluation for calf health.
Yes.
Doesn't it make sense to have one unified evaluation with all data instead of separate evaluations that can conflict?
Well, I think that's an interesting question, but I feel like I'm being set up a little bit because I'm being asked to say that Zoetis should give us all of their data, and I'm not sure how my colleagues at Zoetis would feel about that. And maybe I'll respond back. I don't know what the correlations of the CDCB evaluations are with the Zoetis evaluations because I don't have access to the clarified results. They might be very high. I would hope that they're very high, but they obviously, could differ a little bit. Zoetis may use a little bit different rules than we use. Zoetis may, the demographics of the herds that participate in the Zoetis program may be different. So to answer the question, should we have everything all together and have only a single evaluation? Well, I think that's great in the abstract, but maybe I would point out that this friendly competition, I think, actually pushes all of us to really drive innovation forward. And if we're honest with ourselves in the room, Zoetis was the first group to come out with genetic evaluations for cow health traits. Once they did that and showed it was possible and that there was a demand for it in the market, other groups followed behind. And I always want CDCB to be leading the way and not following, but at the same time, I think we're able to get these information from the field, from participants in the milk recording system, and we're able to use their data to provide value back to them. I think that's worth doing. And I think that the fact that Zoetis is there pushing us is a good thing. There are other companies that have their own proprietary genetic products. So I think in the U.S., right, we sort of believe that constructive competition makes us all better.
All right, John, I do want to ask you one question about net merit, because there's a lot of votes for it in our app here, and as long as you're on the stage.
Sure.
The question is, do you track the percentage of producers that are using the net merit index for their selection decisions? The use of net merit seems to be declining with recent changes.
I saw that question, and I think it's a really interesting question. So for whomever asked it, it's really interesting. The truth is that I don't know how dairy farmers make their selection decisions, right? Folks don't tell us, hey, I use net merit as the basis of this breeding decision. Maybe they used DWP dollars, maybe they used HHP, or they used ICC, or they used TPI. We don't know. But one thing I might comment on is, even if you prefer another selection tool to net merit, when we look at the correlations of all of those selection tools, the correlations are pretty darn high. So that means if you use net merit, you're going to go in pretty much the same direction you're going to go with DWP or TPI or something else. Now, obviously, each index is a little bit different because they prioritize things differently, and one of those may fit your needs better. We hope that net merit fits the needs of many U.S. dairy producers who are in component pricing systems. We believe it does. We publish our methodology for everyone to see and look at and understand exactly where those numbers came from. And we have our methodology reviewed by independent experts to make sure we're not making mistakes. But the reason there are lots of different selection objectives is not every dairy producer is the same, and different folks have different objectives. And we hope that net merit is a good tool for a lot of folks. But for example, if you want more type, because that meets your needs, there are options that provide that to you. And I think, again, it's constructive competition. It's not harmful competition.
I don't know which mic is on.
And to Joao's point, I can't see anything up here with these lights. So, I hope you're all out there.
Thank you very much, John. All right, wonderful, which means we're going to keep moving right along. We are going to start our break a little late, so if you're watching that clock, just know we are a few minutes behind here. But that is all right, because next up we have Ashley Ling. She is one of the researchers that is working on hoof health and mobility at CDCB. So we're excited to have her here and be a part of this.
Is this a clicker? Okay, how does it work? Hello. Oh, there we go. Sorry about that. Let me adjust this just a little bit. Good morning, everybody. It's really good to be here. I have the privilege of talking to you guys a bit about a lameness-resistant trait, a couple lameness-resistant traits that we've had in development. First, we're going to go over hoof health, and second, a more novel data type called mobility. But before we jump into that, I think it is good to set a little bit of context. Just regarding why we were interested in developing a trait like this, it is a very costly and honestly often underestimated issue on the farm. When we look at average lameness rates in our herds, they do tend to average around 25%, up to 70% in the worst cases. And these figures from 2015 put the per cow costs for lameness between $120 to $330, so those are not adjusted for inflation. I think it's convenient to break down these costs. I like the way these have been broken down in the literature into these three general groups. First, we have treatment, so it's going to be money out of pocket to address lameness issues that already exist in the herd. And then production losses, where we're looking at potential profit that is not realized also because of those same existing issues. And then the last is going to be prevention, investments to protect the future health and success of your herd. So we're going to be talking about tools for genetic selection, which we would put under prevention. Before we jump into that, I do want to pivot a little bit to this loss category, go through it just very quickly, because I do think it is easily overlooked. So we were talking about production losses. That's going to be the milk that the cows do not produce. It's going to be calves that are getting on the ground later, and it's going to be the cows that otherwise would not have been called. And these estimates on the involuntary calling, they're a little bit older. The most recent I have here from is about 2010, but we do still receive consistent reports that lameness is a at least top three reason for involuntary calling. And when we consider that, the heifer replacement inventory, according to the USDA NASS, it's down about 17% since 2015, while the total dairy inventory has held steady. So a natural consequence that we might expect from that is that cows will be staying in the herd longer. So we're going to be seeing more of those lactation 3 and higher cows. And we know that health issues, the risk for those does increase in these higher lactations, and that includes lameness. So what we should probably be thinking about now is how we are going to set up these cows for future success as they do grow older, and selection is going to be one of the tools available to do that. So with that in mind at CDCB, we have been looking at a two-sided solution to lameness from the perspective of selection. The first one I'm going to be going over is hoof health. So that's based on lesion incidents that we're sourcing from trimmer records. And second, mobility, like I mentioned before, this is a novel data type that we're sourcing from camera-generated images that are passed through AI to gather daily mobility scores for these cows. Starting with hoof health. So as part of our partnership with the RMS, they shared with us around 550,000 trimmer records that included 100,000 lesion events to facilitate development of this trait. We can see that it has a good representation of herds, over 100,000 cows, over 200,000 parities, and data going back to 2009. We have all the standard lesions in this data, with our most common being digital dermatitis, abscess, ulcer, and white line. And we are following the lead of the existing traditional health traits to model these. So, like John mentioned previously for the calf health traits, the records from the healthy herd mates, in addition to those lesion incidence records, are going to be important. A healthy lactation is itself a phenotype, so we do need that information to include these contemporary groups in the future evaluations. As I showed on the previous slide, we do have a very wide range of lesions with data collected. A lot of them don't have enough data to really develop them as an individual trait. So to address this and make maximum use of the data, the approach that we're using is to at least initially implement 2 traits that group these lesions into incidence of any infectious lesion and then incidence of any non-infectious lesion. And when we look at these potential traits, we do see a genetic basis within these groups that seems to indicate that there is a genetic component that influences resistant to either any infectious trait or any non-infectious trait. As the data grows, as the number of records increase, probably our most common lesions, such as digital dermatitis, we will pivot out of those general groups into their own trait to allow for more targeted selection on those specific lesions. And then to bring all of these together, we're considering introducing a new component to net merit. So in the future, you might see something like hoof dollars. Now, when we look at the heritabilities for these infectious and non-infectious trait groups, we see a range of about 3 to 5% in comparison to the traits that already exist in our evaluations. That does put it in the lowly heritable group, but it is comparable to trait groups like female fertility or calving. So we know that this is still within the range of what we can make genetic progress in. For our DRPC reps in the room, to facilitate ingestion of this data, we are going to be making changes to Format 6, our health format. So currently you can submit lameness data through a lame event code. We consulted with some of our collaborators at University of Minnesota, and we are going to be adding a trim event code specifically for data from trimmers. In addition to that, we're going to be introducing two new cause of lameness codes, laminitis and vertical wall, aka sand cracks. Now for our producers in the room, our producer partners, you guys really make innovation possible. So if you would like to be part of efforts to develop traits like this, again, as John mentioned, we do not have access to your data unless you give permission. So if you would like to be part of this and you're not sure if your data is currently being sent to the National Cooperators Database, ask your DRPC. You do make a difference. In addition to that, keep an eye out for some educational materials that are being developed by our partners at University of Minnesota on data collection for lameness. We expect those to be coming in the near future. So that wraps up hoof health. Moving on to mobility. So if you're at our producer panel last year, you might have already heard a little bit about mobility. If you bring up your phones, have your cameras ready, this QR code, scanning that will actually take you directly to the recording of that talk. There was a lot of really interesting discussion on how they're using data for their daily management, and that included some discussion of the use of mobility from cattle eye camera systems. So if you follow that YouTube link, there's a lot of other really great recordings from past events. So going into our mobility score data, like I said a couple times, this is a very novel data type. It is daily scores on these cows. It is still actively in R&D. We're receiving these scores from Cattle Eye, from their camera system. It's a really interesting system where they put a camera over the exit at the milk parlor, and they take video as the cows walk under the camera. That is passed to an AI algorithm that will then measure for each cow a mobility score. I threw this figure in just to give an idea of, for within a single lactation, what those scores, how they might vary. So for Cattle Eye, lower scores indicate a healthier gait, while higher scores indicate increased lameness. So if you look to the left side of the graph, that's going to be early lactation, and you can see that day to day there is some variability, but we would consider that to be a healthy range. As it moves forward through the lactation, you can see that there is a sudden lameness event, a sudden spike to higher values. It seems that she initially recovers, but then there's a slightly more gradual increase back into lameness. So this is very highly dimensional, very information-rich data that we are putting to use for a potential future genetic evaluation. Currently, we have 6 participating commercial farms with over 60,000 cows with data, over 14 million daily mobility scores, and that's growing all the time. In addition to that, we do have 600,000 trim events from those same herds. So we'll be using that data to better understand this relationship between herd health and mobility, because at this point we do consider them to be different traits, both related to lameness resistance. Some of the research that's coming out of this, or some of the results coming out of this research, one thing that we looked at was comparing mobility to changes in daily milk yield. So to the left are going to be, we put these, the mobility scores in bins, so to the left is going to be healthier values, and then moving to the right on this graph is going to be increased lameness, and then on the y-axis you're going to see levels of milk production. So you can see from this that as we move from healthier to increased lameness, we do see a steady decrease in the amount of milk produced. And for the most severe cases, we're looking at about a 4.5-pound loss of milk per day. This is consistent with previous results, and we are going to be using this to guide future development of this trait. So these are preliminary estimates of heritability. We have looked at a couple potential trait expressions for this, and what we're seeing, again, preliminarily, a range of about 10 to 30%. So that makes it comparable to our type traits, milk production, and we would say that there's good potential genetic progress for this. And the good news for it, so very recently one of our partners at University of Minnesota, Dr. Gerard Kramer, he received an FFAR grant with contributions from CDCB and other industry partners. The total allocation was for $2 million. This is going to support collection for both mobility scores and trimmer records on those same cows for another 60,000 cows over the next 3 years. So I would say, in the near future, expect some, new exciting results coming out of this research. Just to wrap that all up, some key takeaways. We can select for lameness resistance. Hoof health, again, is going to be lowly heritable, but is comparable fertility and calving, so we can make genetic progress through selection on this. Mobility, again, preliminary, but I think we can confidently say that's going to be in that moderate heritability range, comparable to like milk production. So there is good potential for genetic progress in that. Hoof health, we are wrapping up the R&D phase for that. So we do not have a set date for implementation, but I would say that it is on the horizon. And as part of that, we are currently making updates to Format 6 to allow ingestion of that data. And that's going to include addition of this trim event code and also laminitis and vertical wall sand cracks for the cause of lameness. Mobility, it's still in R&D. We are acquiring more data. That research is actively moving forward, so expect more updates in the near future. And just a final call out to our producer partners that if you'd like to be part of these efforts, ask your DRPC if your data is being contributed, and keep an eye out for these future educational materials on collecting this lameness data. So again, just another thank you to all of our partners. Thank you for listening. I'll defer to Katie whether we have time for questions.
Yes, so we do have one quick question, and then we will go to a break, or maybe two. But Ashley, to get us started, will heifer lameness be accounted for in a broader lameness trait?
Heifer lameness specifically, rather than, as far as I know, we have not looked at that yet. So it's just being like all the lactations are being grouped together under a single lameness trait.
Okay, the next one. Will lameness be determined from the mobility scores to add to the lame events, or will this be two separate traits?
I would say there has, from our university partners, they have done a bit of work looking into whether mobility can predict lameness in the sense of lesion occurrence. But at this point, we do consider them to be individual traits, both capturing different angles of lameness.
Absolutely. All right, and then one last one here. For herds contributing mobility data, are there different breeds represented in that population?
Ooh. I believe it's just Holstein at this point. I think we may be considering expanding potentially to including Jersey data as we expand as part of the FFAR grant. But at this point, the data we have available is from Holstein farms.
As you guys can see, the lights are very bright up
Yes.
there, and we have a very collaborative team. So we had Kristen and John in the front also trying to help Ashley out there. They all work together on that project.
Yes.
But Ashley, that is where we will end our Q&A session. Everyone in the audience, we will take a break at this point. We will start back up at 9:50, so we are going to reclaim those lost 5 minutes. So 9:50, please be back in your seats. There is coffee, hot tea in the center of the room, and hopefully you found the pastries in the back of the room as well. But please enjoy a little break. Attention to people in the room. It is 9:45. We will start our meeting again promptly at 9:50. So please start making your way back to your seats. We will be starting again in 5 minutes. All right, are you ready? Okay. I'm going to answer a couple questions to get people sitting. All right, everyone, we are at 9:50. This is the time. We are going to get back on schedule with our agenda. So please make your way to your seats. As you are doing so, I just want to address a question in the Slido app that we've not gotten to yet. It is about the paperwork to release data. So when we talk about data contributions into the National Cooperator Database, it really starts at the farm with your relationship with your milk tester, so your DHI organization. From there, it moves on to the Dairy Record Processing Center, and then eventually into the National Cooperator Database. So for producers who are interested and willing to share data with the National Evaluation System, with the National Cooperator Database, you need to first start with your DHI organization, check what your data permissions look like, and then move on to your DRPC as well. If you are not involved in the system in that way today, please come find somebody in a CDCB shirt. We'd love to talk to you more about the benefits of being in the integrated system and how you can contribute that data. So just wanted to address that as we're settling back in, because our next speaker to the stage is going to talk about a topic that has been on everyone's mind for more than a year now. We keep hearing the very common phrase of female fertility. So we're very, very happy to have Dr. Taylor McWhorter with us here today, who has been leading the charge on the work surrounding female fertility traits that currently exist, and also is going to talk about something new going on. So Taylor, the stage is yours to talk about our modern hurdles and modern herds.
All right. Hello, everyone. Thank you for the introduction, Katie. I am very excited to talk to you all today about a project that I've been very passionate about. And what our goal here is to align our female fertility evaluations with modern herds and our modern hurdles. In our time together this morning, I want to touch a little bit on the traits that CDCB offers and evaluates for our female fertility, and a little bit about the key components that go into those traits. I'll talk about the management changes that are calling for a potential reevaluation of how we're conducting these. A little bit about some trends we've seen in young animals, specifically young bulls, and how we're going to go about aligning these evaluations. I'll also share with you all our next steps, as well as how you can help and contribute to the National Cooperators Database and help specifically with female fertility. So the current 4 traits that CDCB evaluates for female fertility are daughter pregnancy rate, cow conception rate, heifer conception rate, and early first calving. When we talk about DPR, or daughter pregnancy rate, it's predicting the number or the percentage of non-pregnant cows that are going to become pregnant in each 21-day cycle. When we're selecting on this trait, when we see a positive PTA that is desirable, that's indicating higher fertility in our offspring. And what I'm going to put up here in the next few slides is a QR code. You can take a picture or scan it, and this is going to take you to a Web Connect page specifically on breed means, and that's going to help us understand how we can interpret the PTAs for these next few traits. So for example here, if we have bull A with a DPR PTA of 0, we can expect his daughters to have around a 31% pregnancy rate. Now, this is a breed mean for the Holstein cows that were born in 2020, but at this QR code, you can go on and see all the traits for multiple breeds. Now, if we have a second bull, let's say his PTA is +1, that's telling us that we actually expect his daughter's average to be 32%, that 1% higher. For our cow conception rate, a little different, we're predicting the lactating cow's ability to conceive. Just like DPR, we're looking for those positive PTAs. And when we select for a bull that has a 0 PTA for CCR, we're expecting his daughters to have an average conception rate of 41%. Now, if we see that bull B here, again, he has a +1 PTA for CCR, we expect his daughter's average to be 42%. Very similar to CCR, our heifer conception rate here is actually predicting the maiden heifer's ability to conceive. It's considered a separate trait. We're also looking for those positive PTAs in our animals. And for our bull with a 0 PTA for HCR, we expect his daughters, his heifers, to have a 56.1% conception rate, whereas our bull with the +1 PTA, now we're seeing his daughters expected to be around 57%. And our fourth and final trait that was most recently introduced in 2019 was early first calving. Now we're talking about predicting the ability to alter the female's offspring age at first calving. This one gets a little bit confusing because we're talking about number of days that are lower, but we're still selecting for a positive PTA here. That means earlier calving. So for example, if we have our bull with our 0 PTA, we expect his daughters to have their first calving at around 724 days. But if we have our bull B with his positive PTA at +1, we're actually expecting his daughters to have their first calving at 723 days, 1 day less. A lot of data goes into these female fertility evaluations. You've heard some discussion on how we receive data in formats. So some of those that go into the fertility evaluations, we really need pedigree records, and that comes into us as format 1. We also utilize format 4s, that's going to be our lactation records. And we also include information from format 5s. This is our key reproductive events that are required for these traits. Within these formats, we use a couple different components. We need to know calving dates to be able to calculate these traits. We need to know individual information about inseminations. Who was the service sire used? When did this occur? What was the mating type? We also need to know when the pregnancy was confirmed so we can get those records into the evaluation. We also need to know the embryo transfer status, as well as information on the contemporary groups. This is going to be information such as herds, year, season of calving. And of course, as John just mentioned, we need the animal data. This is also going to include a correct animal ID, a sire ID, a dam ID, and a birth date. Now, why do we need the embryo transfer status? Well, specifically for our female fertility traits that utilize insemination data, we do apply 2 embryo transfer edits. The first one of those edits is where we actually remove embryo transfer cows and heifers inseminations that we've received, that later are embryo transfer cows and heifers, that have a resulting birth from an embryo transfer, that have a split embryo, a clone from a nuclear transfer, or embryo pedigree. Our second embryo transfer edit pertains to the records that we receive. So if we look at an individual herd year, and we receive embryo transfer information in 2 forms of information. We get birth codes, and we also get reproductive events. So if we have a significant discrepancy between the embryo transfer information we receive in birth codes and a significant difference from those that we receive in reproductive events, we're really not sure which information to go off on. So unfortunately, we do have to remove those herd years. If we take a look at the data that is the raw insemination data, across the bottom, we're going to see the years from the early 2000s to the current. And on the y-axis, we're looking at the total number of inseminations by each of these years. The green line there is our raw data before either of these edits take place. The orange line there is after we remove those embryo transfer cows and heifers. And the bottom blue line there is after we apply both edits. Now you might see at the most recent years, we've removed around 3 to 4% of data for each of these edits. This is not indicative of all embryo transfers that are out there. This is all we can speak to is the number of inseminations that are reported to us and in the National Cooperators Database. As we know with fertility, it was developed over 20 years ago, and a lot of management changes have occurred in those 20 years. One of those that was brought to our attention pertains to voluntary waiting period. So this is going to be the intentional number of days that we are waiting between her calving and her first service. Now, the industry reported that more recently, we're selecting a voluntary waiting period based on individual herds and individual animals. Now, when DPR was established in the early 2000s, we had to assume a voluntary waiting period of 50 days with a 20-day grace period. And we now see that that is not as equal to all herds as it was maybe back then. What we have here is our average voluntary waiting period across herds in years. So again, on the bottom, we're looking at years from early 2000s to current. And on the y-axis, we're looking at number of days between 65 and 70. And we also have it segmented by lactation group. So that red line there, you're looking at first lactations only, and the blue line is going to be our second and later lactations. And just as it was reported to us in the last several years, we are seeing an increase in the average voluntary waiting period by herds. So how do we address this in the current evaluation as it stands? Well, our first proposed update to the evaluation is going to be to take that DPR formula and actually include a variable voluntary waiting period that is calculated by herd year and by lactation group. This is going to tackle the herd level voluntary waiting period selection, but we also have another proposed update that could help account for the individual cow voluntary waiting period. This is going to be a potential new trait called first service to conception. This was developed by our partners at the USDA Agile by Dr. Jason Graham, who's here with us this morning. And our first service to conception is an interval trait. It's going to be the number of days from our first service to conception. And because we are just looking at those days from first service, we're not actually having to take into account the voluntary waiting period. And as I mentioned, it's an interval trait that is going to account for these individual cow changes. A little bit more about first service to conception. We're still trying to predict the lactating cow's ability to conceive, but as an interval trait. We're still selecting for a positive PTA, and just like early first calving, that positive PTA is actually going to be fewer days. So our bull with his 0 PTA, we're seeing his daughters have an expected average of 55 days between her first service and conception. Whereas our bull B here with a 1.0 PTA, we're expecting that 1 day less for his daughters from their first service to conception. In addition to voluntary waiting periods, we also know that there's been a change in the type of inseminations used on our cattle. Now, you can read the National Association of Animal Breeders, or NAAB, activity report from 2024, and actually the last few years prior to that, and we all see increased use of beef on dairy. This was from 2023 to 2024. We actually saw an increase by about 317,000 units, both in US and exports for beef on dairy. Now, how does this come to play with the evaluation? Well, our conception rates are calculated using individual inseminations. Before we consolidate all these individual inseminations in a single lactation into one conception rate per lactation, we really need to adjust for the variation between these inseminations, so we don't lose it when we get a single conception rate. Now, the current evaluation does already adjust these individual inseminations. We currently account for the region by month of the insemination, as well as the mating type by year. And we are accounting for if it is sexed or unsexed semen. But how can we improve this, especially when it comes to beef on dairy? We do not currently consider the service sire breed in these adjustments. But if we take a look at the service sire breeds that are reported in inseminations in the National Cooperators Database, this is for cows. We'll show heifers on the next slide. Again, on the bottom, we're looking at years early 2000 to current, and on the y-axis, we're looking at the proportion within each year of the service sire breed that is utilized in all of these inseminations. So also we can take and zoom in on 2024, our last complete year of data for fertility evaluations. And we can see here, Holstein is about 43% of those reported service sires, following closely second by a 28.9% of Angus service sires. Unfortunately, our third most prevalent service sire utilized is an unknown or unreported service sire, followed by Jersey, Simmental, Charolais, Kobe, and our other breeds. For our heifers, we're all aware of the story. We're not utilizing beef semen, at least those reported in the National Cooperators Database. In 2024, we were still led by inseminations being serviced by 68% Holstein, again 18% unknown or unreported, 13% Jersey, and that last remaining 0.6% of inseminations on heifers for our other dairy breeds and other reported breeds. So, to update the evaluation, given this information, our third proposed update is that we include service sire breed as an adjustment on these individual inseminations. We will continue to also adjust for our breeding event type or our mating type. So that comes into play with AI with traditional, non-gender selected semen, our AI breeding with selected semen, gender selected semen, our natural service breedings, as well as unknown. They are not being removed, but they are being accounted for as unknown, and this is why complete records are so crucial. We also account for what we call the short cycle. Now, when we get 2 inseminations, if they're within 10 days of each other, we're replacing that second insemination to the first. But if they're within 10 to 17 days of each other, we're actually reporting this as a short cycle 1. That tells us maybe something's going on there biologically, and we just want to make a note of that it could be different from a cow that has inseminations more than 17 days apart from each other. We can also take a look at the trends we've observed in some of our young animals in recent years. Now, as we're going across these 2 decades, of course, our methodologies are changing, and to ensure stability, we always need to revisit our evaluations, which is what sparked this original review. In some recent years, we've seen some subtle but consistent changes, specifically seasonal patterns in our young animals. And what we saw in some young bulls is that they gradually but consistently declined from evaluation to evaluation as more information was coming in. Now, this is not completely unexpected. As we get more information into the evaluation, our animals are going to change their PTAs. We did expect a slight, more normal distribution of increases and decreases, which is why we wanted to take a look at this. And what we found is this is actually derivative of the trait itself and how the records enter the evaluation system of when they're complete. And essentially, this can be understood as that our high fertility heifers are typically going to be our higher fertility cows, and they're actually going to enter the data stream earlier than our lower fertility cows. I'm going to go over a brief timeline of what this looks like for 2 heifers born to the same bull. Let's start by looking at his first daughter. So we're going to start in January 2022, and our goal here is to get these animals into the December 2024 evaluation. And when I say get them into the evaluation, I mean get their phenotypes into the evaluation. So let's say the daughters are born in March of 2022. We're going to go for that first service at about 13 months. And although she's a high fertility animal, let's say it takes her 2 services to conceive. So we'll be seeing her have her second successful service around July of 23. We'll expect her to calve around April 2024. And then let's say we have a 60-day voluntary waiting period before we do her first service as a cow. And she's a high fertility animal, but let's say it does take her 2 services to get pregnant. So we're looking at that second successful service in July. And let's say we can confirm her pregnancy just 1 month later in August. That means that when November comes around, before the triennial evaluation for December, her record is complete. So her record can enter the data stream. Now, if we look at the second daughter born to the same bull, these are his first 2 daughters, let's say, and we also had her first service in June of 23. But let's say she's a lower fertility animal, and she actually takes 3 services to get pregnant as a heifer. We're already seeing how this timeline has shifted a little bit for the 2 daughters to try and get into that 2024 evaluation. She calves in May of 2024. We wait the 60 days before we have her first service as a cow, but she's a lower fertility animal, and it takes her 4 services to get pregnant. We're now confirming her pregnancy in November 2024 after the evaluation phenotype cutoff has occurred. So unfortunately, the second daughter does not make the December evaluation. And how does that impact the PTAs? Well, our higher fertility females are entering the data pipeline just a little bit earlier. So when a young bull gets his first daughter records, we see those highest fertility records first. But after more daughters enter, we see that more normal distribution of his daughter's performances. So how can we address this in the evaluation without just withholding all of the daughters until he has a certain number, right? Because we want phenotypes to enter the evaluation as they can. Well, one way to remedy this we came up with is that when we have our first lactation cows, we want to ensure that they're at least 3 years old before their first phenotype can enter the evaluation. What this does is this is allowing for both high and moderate to low fertility animals to enter their phenotypes into the evaluation at the same time, which is most impactful for these young bulls. There are several additional points that we want to include in these updates and align these evaluations further. The fifth proposed update on this is that one thing when we developed DPR in the early 2000s, I shouldn't say we, the USDA Agile developed DPR. And since then, our data has doubled. We're talking about 90 million records in this evaluation. But when it was first developed, and we had those records back from 1960, we had a lot less complete records. So at the time, we were trying to predict incomplete records. But this is no longer needed with the amount of data we have. So we can remove those incomplete records. This is about 0.02% to just under 4% of data removed, depending on the year. Those higher proportions that are removed are going to be the older data, typically between 1960 and 2000. Another update to the evaluation is we spent some time improving our extraction program. So our extraction programs are what reach into the database every triennial evaluation, and we pull out and perform the simple edits based on an individual trait basis. So of course, we're always trying to improve computational efficiency to ensure the smooth and quick release of our evaluations. Another update that we're visiting is a new effect in the model for CCR and our potential new trait for service to conception. And we want to include a covariable effect for days of milk at the first insemination. We found this effect to be significant for these two traits. Our eighth proposed update is going to be how we model these traits. Currently, the 4 existing traits are modeled all together in a multiple trait evaluation, but early first calving is treated as an uncorrelated trait. Now we're trying to add first service to conception, which is also a very highly correlated trait with our existing cow traits. So in order to, again, ensure computational efficiency, we're going to move EFC to its own single trait evaluation and move first service to conception into the multiple trait model to ensure those high correlations are helping each trait out. And how that's impacted is we're also re-estimating variance components for these traits. What does that mean? Well, during our last 10 years of data, we go ahead and use that. And we get updated heritabilities, genetic correlations, environmental correlations. So when we extracted the last 10 years of data and looked at those heritabilities, we actually see an increase. And you might say, why are heritabilities increasing? Well, heritability is just a proportion of the additive genetic variance out of the total variance. And part of that total variance includes the environmental variance. So if we see environmental variance decreasing, right, we're seeing more stability in our management or environment over time, this could lead to increased genetic heritabilities. I also mentioned we get some updated genetic correlations. A quick review, when we talk about correlation, we talk about correlation between 2 traits, and this is just telling us how the genes from one trait are related to the genes affecting another trait. So if we had a +1 correlation, that's saying, hey, if animal A has really good genes for trait 1, they're likely going to have good genes for trait 2. Opposite, if we get a -1 correlation, that says that if an animal has good genes for trait 1, they're probably going to have some bad genes for trait 2. And if we have a 0 correlation, that simply tells us that we have the genes for trait 1 are telling us no information about another trait. So if we look at the genetic correlations between our female fertility traits, as I mentioned, we have very highly correlated female fertility traits in terms of cow conception rate, first service to conception, and daughter pregnancy rate. We see more moderate relationships with heifer conception rate. And why are these correlations, these strong correlations, so incredibly useful? Well, I already mentioned that daughter pregnancy rate has data from 1960 until the current. Contrarily, when we talk about CCR, HCR, and FSC, we only have data from 2002 until the current. Why is this? Well, individual insemination data was not collected until 2002. But fear not, we can get information from DPR. They're very highly correlated, so in this multiple trait model, DPR is performing a very supportive role in sharing its information, especially for this historical data. So our final proposed update for the evaluation of female fertility is to implement these new variance components, which would update heritability and our correlations. Where do we go from here? Well, the very important step in updating these traits is to perform an interval validation. This is an international committee that ensures that our traits are performing as we expect them to, and it's a global standard. So we do need to submit these changes as well as the potential new trait to an interval test run. Now, the next available interval test run is January 2026. Now, if we pass that, we can look forward into the implementation, and as we've mentioned, it goes to operations, which includes myself, so I'm happy to take that next step and move this forward once we pass the interval validation. And as I am so passionate about this project, I'm very excited to share with you as soon as we know these next steps, as soon as we pass this validation, and as soon as we can announce an implementation date. What can you do to help with this specific project and a call to action, and how can you contribute to the National Cooperator Database? Well, it would help if we had a service sire properly recorded for all of the inseminations that are submitted. What does this mean? To include a proper NAAB bull ID, especially with each of these reproductive events. And this allows us to use that factor more effectively and have reduced unknown service sires. You can also help us by ensuring that the embryo transfer, birth codes, and reproductive events align and are both recorded. And as John already mentioned, ensuring the animal ID is unique and recorded correctly, and ensuring we have complete pedigrees, including an animal date of birth. At this time, I would like to thank you all for your attention today. This QR code here will help you stay connected to CDCB. If you're not already following our monthly newsletter, it's just one monthly newsletter. You can hop onto this and register. It's called The Connection. And at this time, I really look forward to any of your questions about female fertility. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Taylor. We do have a few questions already in, so we will get started with those. What is the difference in practice between FSC and CCR? Seems like the correlation should be almost 1.
Yeah, that's a great question. So there's a couple differences between this. When we're talking about CCR, we're talking about how many inseminations does it take to get her pregnant. So we're talking about a proportion, and we can also account for those differences within that occur across those inseminations. When we're talking about first service to conception, it is just an interval trait. This allows us to include maybe more phenotypes that do not report inseminations, right? Because we just need the first conception, but maybe they don't report later, and then her conception. So they're two great traits, slightly different, and they will also contribute information to each other as they are also highly correlated. Thank you.
Yeah, also related to the new trait, how are abortions handled in that new trait FSC?
How are abortions handled in the new trait first service to conception? They are not accounted for in the current traits. Late abortions are not. We're just talking about conceiving at this point.
Okay, I think maybe you addressed this in your talk, but we're going to throw it out there just in case. So the genetic trend for DPR doesn't reflect the huge increases in phenotypic fertility in the past 20 years. This has caused a shift to using CCR. Can DPR be fixed?
It's a great question. So all of this research has also been addressing the genetic trend. Unfortunately, in the short time we had together today, I don't have the trends for you, but we will be publishing those in the future, and I will be presenting on them. So yes, this was our way of addressing and aligning these female fertility evaluations with the concerns that we've received.
All right, and then the last one, will a fertility sub-index be explored in the near future?
Absolutely. Let's see, as Ashley and I'm not sure John touched on it today with net merit, but it is a possibility we could research using a sub-index for fertility to just make ease of selection.
Perfect. Okay, we did get one quick one. Sorry.
That's okay.
Is sexed semen taken into consideration in these female fertility traits?
Yes. When I talked about the adjustments, so we want to know from insemination to insemination what's changing. One of those things is mating type, right? And so that's our sexed unsexed, traditional, or unknown. So yes, we are. Thank you, Katie.
Perfect. And I think we got through them that are related to your female fertility traits.
Okay.
So thank you, Taylor.
Thank you. Thanks.
All right. There we go. Thank you very much, Taylor. I know that was a topic that a lot of people were interested in hearing more about, so hopefully we got questions answered. Again, all of these talks are being recorded. They will be available on our YouTube page following the event. So please feel free to check those out if you want to reference them later on. To help us transition from new traits into the later portion of our program this morning, we're going to invite Dr. Cole back up to the stage to talk about additional research that's also being done right now that is a little further from completion. So a little bit more in the R&D space, still less in the operations space at this point in time, and where we go from here. So I know there's some questions happening already that we're going to throw out at Dr. Cole when he's done, but in the meantime, we will hand it back over to you to talk about the traits, research and project progress and traits of the future. So, Dr. Cole.
Thank you, Katie. I don't know if y'all won a bet or lost a bet to get to hear me twice in one day, but you know, I'm sure you'll let me know. Okay, so I'm going to follow up here, and I'm going to have to go a little quick on this because I have like 10 minutes and 20 slides. I took some out, I really did. So really, what I'm going to talk about here is give a real quick review of some projects that CDCB is involved with other collaborators, just to kind of let you know what we're working on that you might hear more about down the road, right? And then I'm also going to talk about what are traits that might be interesting in the future, and I'm going to talk a little bit about the process for bringing new traits into the world. And I don't know if I have time for any closing thoughts, but here in the photo you'll see that's some of the folks from the CDCB team, along with the land-grant university dairy cattle genetics researchers in a meeting we had in Minnesota last year, just to emphasize that in addition to the close collaborations we have with USDA Agile, with National DHIA and their partners, we're also involved in working closely with the universities. So where are we on some of our current projects? Many of you have heard in the past, Dr. Malia Caputo on our staff has given updates periodically on our lactation factors project. The goal of that project is to collect all milkings for animals so that we can update the factors we use to project lactations. The whole point of that is so that we can compare the performance of two animals. We compare them on an apples to apples basis. This involves working with herds all over the US, Holstein herds, Jersey herds, different regions, different sizes of herds. That project is ongoing, but it's moving along nicely. And one of the nice things that's coming out of that, in addition to data that we can use to update our correction factors, is information, milk spectral data, milk fatty acid data that we believe we can feed into some other projects that we can build into some new tools down the road. So that's going nicely. We're also involved with some projects that are supported by the Foundation for Food and Agricultural Research. So these are projects at some of the land-grant universities. So, one of them is focused, and I'll show a couple of slides after this. We're working closely with folks at University of Wisconsin, but also some of the other universities to collect methane emissions information, to figure out the best way in the US population to predict those emissions, and figure out what to do with them to make tools, right? We're also doing some work that's related to, nutrient utilization and other emissions, and development of these methanogen inhibitors, right? Because there are bugs that live in the rumen of the cow. Some of those are responsible for making most of the methane that cows burp out. So the question is, can we manipulate the makeup of that population so that cows emit less methane while maintaining their levels of production and other performance. And so we're involved in all of these projects through funding. We're working closely with Francisco Peña-Garicano's team at University of Wisconsin. Dr. Peña-Garicano and his folks are here with us, and they're working on several different aspects of methane. So they're looking at developing evaluations, understanding things going on in the rumen, making nutritional modifications to diets to limit methane production. So it's really a full spectrum approach, and it's also collecting other information about the animals, right? So fecal microbiome, oral microbiome, rumen microbiome. And this project is going well. There are about 3,000 animals that have been phenotyped. I know that that may not sound like a lot when we talk about the tens of millions of animals that go into some of the other evaluations, but you have to start somewhere, and we have to remember that it's expensive and requires special equipment to record the methane evaluations. So we have to start somewhere. And as I said, they're also collecting milk spectral data. Our friends in Canada have suggested that you can use the mid-infrared spectral emission data from milk samples, from testing milk samples, to make predictions of methane output. And they're also sampling the microbiome. And this again is also labor intensive, and we're still trying to figure out the best way to use that information. We are working internally. You already heard mentioned earlier single-step genomic evaluations. Currently, we do the genomic evaluations in 2 steps. First, we use the pedigree and performance information to estimate breeding values, and then we add in genomic information afterwards. This has worked well for us, but it is a little bit clumsy to have it in 2 pieces, and there are some statistical advantages to going to a single-step model. We can avoid some potential sources of bias, and frankly, it is a much easier system for our operations team to work with. There are fewer points of failure. It's easier to figure out where there are problems when there are problems. And this is a big project. A lot of progress has been made, things like unknown parent groups and meta-founders. That's maybe not so interesting. We found some ways to improve the way that reliabilities are predicted for animals that are important. We've done work with the folks at University of Georgia and at Holstein Association USDA to prove that it's feasible to do an all-breed single-step evaluation, so we can continue doing what we're doing. And then the software development team has been working with the IT team to move. Currently, all of our calculations are done on kind of one big box, right? It's a little bit of an old-fashioned model. And the problem is that simply doesn't scale up to the computing we have to do with single step. And not only have Chip Donatone and Nathan Blair and those folks move things to the cloud, they've also made substantial speed ups in the calculation time. And that benefits everybody, because we can get things out the door faster. If we find a mistake and have to fix it, it's feasible to redo the calculations. So it ensures we can get the highest quality evaluations out the door. We're also working on some other projects with the folks at University of Georgia. One, we work closely with them on single step because they invented single step, and we're going to be using their software. We're also doing some other things, right? They did some really cool math tricks to make a certain approximation that's used go really fast. I hope none of you ask me what the math trick is, because I don't know what an elliptical integral is. I asked my kid to figure it out. He's majoring in math. He said he'll get back to me. We're also doing some work on different ways to estimate genetic diversity, right? We understand the continued concern about changes in genetic diversity in our populations, and then also some things like genome-wide association studies. What you need to know about that is when we come to you and tell you, hey, we found some genes that are associated with a trait, genome-wide association studies are the methodology we use to associate a gene or a region of the genome with a phenotype. We're also doing some work with Breno Fragamini's group at University of Connecticut related to genotype by environment and heat stress work. And they've recently been doing some work using herds in the state of Texas, right, that experience a lot of heat stress for a long time, and herds in the state of Wisconsin where they don't typically experience a lot of heat stress. And they've shown some interesting differences. And one of the things that's interesting is if you account for the genotype by environment in the model, it helps the predictions for the animals in Texas, and it doesn't really have any impact on the animals from Wisconsin because the animals from Wisconsin didn't experience heat stress anyway. So we're continuing to work with Breno and his students on this. I'm going to talk a little bit here about which traits may be of interest in the future and a little bit about how we go from an idea to an evaluation. And I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this slide. This whole topic of the cow of the future has received a lot of attention in the last few years. And you certainly can't go to a dairy science meeting without there being a talk about the cow of the future. And there's maybe some very broad consensus, but I'm sure for everything I've listed here, someone will come up to me after the meeting and say, John, that's a terrible idea. Some of you are probably texting me, even as I speak, to tell me that this is a bad idea. The point is to get people talking and thinking. And we absolutely base the work we do with new traits on input from the field. So we work with groups like the CDCB Board of Directors because all 4 sectors of the industry are represented there. We have the Producer Advisory Committee. So we sit down in a room with dairy producers and hear from your own mouth what it is you need, and it's not mediated through other people's opinions. We also meet and interact with other groups from allied industry because you guys know as well as I do there's a lot of steps between my chair in front of my desk and the cows in your barn. So we need that input, right? Because just because a scientist has an idea about something that's useful doesn't mean it's actually useful to you. And we really want to align the things that we're doing at CDCB with the things that are needed by the dairy industry. And I'm just going to run through this real fast because I talked about this for like an hour yesterday at University of Wisconsin. I don't have an hour today. So this is the real broad strokes. How do we go from an idea to a new trait? So we start with the red arrow on the far left. That's someone's like, hey, I wonder if we could measure this. Okay, maybe you write a proposal, maybe you go to your experiment station director, whatever, we go to National DHIA and find some data. And then we move to the dark blue bar where we're actually doing research, right? So we're calculating variance components, we're just looking at the raw data. How are they distributed? What are their properties? What's the relationship of this trait to other traits, right? And Taylor talked a lot about some of those things in her talk. If this looks really promising and our consultation with the PAC and other groups says, hey, no, this is something that could be useful, we move into pre-production. And that's things like, the development. Taylor talked about our extract programs, for example, that reach into the database, pull the information out and get it ready. If we're working with Agile USDA on something, they often develop programs that they then hand to CDCB, right? And then we move into sort of our testing and validation phase, and that's where we give it to Dr. Ezekiel Nicolazzi and his operations team. And those folks are really mean because they look at stuff and they ask, you guys ask tough questions. Those guys ask even tougher questions. And the point is they're kicking the tires to make sure that this thing is actually ready to go out the door, that all of the answers make sense, right? That everything is ready. And then when they're convinced that the programs all work, the results make sense, then we would move into production. And so when we move into production, test files go out to industry collaborators, right? So we have, folks like Ryan Starkenberg and Bob Welper and other colleagues who scrutinize everything, and they're the guys who are like, This number changed by 0.2 between May and June. What's going on with that? We do our education and outreach efforts to explain what these new traits are. Then you'll see the PTAs in the files, and then you have a new tool in front of you to use. And this is a process that does take time because we have to go through a lot of steps. The goal is to put something in front of you that's useful and trustworthy. It's not to put something in front of you as fast as we possibly can. And I already addressed some of these points, but how do we decide what we're going to do next? And as I said, we often figure that out by talking to people. We look at what's technologically possible or what data are available in the system, right? We look at what their properties are. The existence of data flows is important because if we have to start from scratch with building a data collection system, that takes a long time, and it's not just about the amount of time it takes at CDCB. It's about the time it takes, at the milk testing labs if we ask them to change things, at the DRPCs, on the farm if we're asking you to put new things into Dairy Comp or into DART that you're not used to putting in there. So, we try to think about all of that. And then we also think about the technical characteristics of traits. Is it heritable, right? That seems like a really basic question, but, sometimes we start with the basic questions because if the heritability is 0, maybe we can produce a tool that's useful, but it won't be a genetic tool. And then is CDCB the best group to offer that tool or somebody else? Uh-oh. Oh, there we go. I think I was pushing the wrong button. Sorry, y'all. So for closing thoughts, right? And I know we've all said this morning about how important collaboration is, but it's absolutely true. The system that we've all built in the U.S., right, since Herman Rabild started the first DHI in Michigan in like 1894 or so, right? We've built this system through collaboration with National DHIA. We've built this system through collaboration with dairy farmers, with the genetics industry. As we've moved into genomics, we've built collaboration with genotyping laboratories and genomic nominators. And so the idea of collaboration is built into everything we do at CDCB because it works. Obviously, our historical collaboration with USDA, where USDA scientists built the system that we're using today. And that is going to continue in the future, the partnership with all of the dairy producers in the room and listening online. We develop new traits, the CDCB staff, based on what the industry tells us they need. Yes, we do also collaborate with university folks, and sometimes they're pursuing things that are maybe a little more blue sky, a little bit more longer term, but that's okay because they're looking down the road and maybe what they're working on leads to something in the future that works for all of us. And I just I always want to argue for the continued cooperation. Sometimes there's friction because different groups have different objectives. That's okay. One of the things I love is that folks in this room aren't afraid to call me, text me, email me, and tell me, hey, I enjoyed your talk, but I think you're dead wrong about this thing you said. That's okay. If all we ever do is agree with each other, then we're blind to challenges that we need to be aware of. We're missing somebody's point of view. And so, let's all keep working together as we have so successfully for the dairy producer. And I'm happy to answer any questions related to new traits where we're going in the future.
Okay, we're going to take a few minutes for just a couple questions because, John, I have been sitting on this one since this morning.
Okay.
With so many female genotypes coming in from abroad, should new traits be chosen and developed keeping international producers in mind?
Well, I think that I'll admit that that's a question I haven't thought a lot about, but maybe to the person who posed the question, I might need an example, because when I look at the portfolio of traits that CDCB offers, right, I see us really growing to cover health, longevity, fertility, mobility, and when I look, say, at what are in the selection goals of other countries, I see a lot of similarity. So it's certainly possible that there's something that's really important in another country that we're missing. But I think in a general sense, we're broadly aligned with what folks are doing in other places. So I know that's not a super specific answer. Maybe you could help me with a little more specific example of something where you feel like we're missing out on something important.
Sure. Quickly, if you have the answer, what changes in heritability do you foresee in, what changes in heritability do you foresee with the switch to single step?
Okay, heritability, okay, and Taylor did a nice job of talking about it. A heritability is a characteristic of a population. So I don't anticipate to see heritabilities change very much. And if they do, that means that we've been doing a poor job of estimating them under our existing models. When we estimate variance components, that's a fancy way of saying the pieces that go into heritability. When we estimate variance components with our traditional model and then compare them to variance components estimated with single step, the changes are very small. So you're not going to see the heritability of something go from 4% to 12%, right? We have no reason to believe the changes will be notable.
All right, with that, we are going to wrap up questions for you, John, and I believe you have asked for the privilege of introducing our next speaker.
I have, and our next speaker is Dr. Albert DeVries from the University of Florida, and I asked for the prerogative of introducing Dr. DeVries because Albert and I were roommates for 3 years in graduate school, and I have the privilege of being on the graduate faculty at the University of Florida. So I've had the pleasure of working with Albert for many years on various projects. And Albert is going to come up and talk to us about longevity. His area of research is broadly focused on production economics in dairy cattle, and he's the person at the back of the room in meetings who's always pushing us, and he says, well, you know, why are you saying that's the right way to do it? Is that actually more profitable? Does that calculation make sense? And so, you know, Albert is in high demand all over the world, and he knows much more about economics than I'll ever know. So you should all be reassured to know he's often in the room when we're talking about net merit. And so Albert, please join us.
Well, thank you for that introduction. Yeah, John and I, we have some stories that we will not share with you here, okay? So if you look through your program, you see that we have a producer panel talking about how long cows should live. And since longevity is a favorite topic of me to talk about, I'm glad that I had the opportunity to share a few data and a few ideas about how long cows should live, without having really the answers to many of these questions. So let's sort of get to the heart of the matter, and this is all CDCB data here. And what you see on the graph here, if I see it from a little distance here, is the estimated breeding value for productive life. That's the blue and the red over time, since birth year about 1992 until the most recent birth year. I pulled this data up a week ago here, and from sires and for cows. And you can see that since about 2010 or so, since genomic evaluation really took full force, we've increased a lot of ability for cows to stay longer in the herds. More than a year actually. But if you look at the green line, that is the phenotypic data that is in the CDCB database of how long cows actually stay in herds. And you see immediately the major discrepancy, puzzle for many of us actually, why cows that are able to stay much longer in the herd are not staying longer in the herd. Okay, and so we've bred about more than a year of breeding value of productive life into our cows in those 30 years. That means that together, if productive life, and I have to almost look at my, it's hard to see almost, yeah. If I had about 29 months of productive life in 1992, and if we had added, thank you very much, if we had added those 12 months to it, cows in today's herds should last about 42 months after first calving. And they're not, right? If you look at the green line, they don't stay much longer, although they stay a little bit longer since the dip in maybe 2015, as was indicated earlier. And so if you convert productive life, then how long cows stay after calving, into annual replacement rates, and I said, well, say if the annual replacement rate was about 29% in 1992, no, if it was about 41% in 1992, then we should have been at a replacement rate of about 29% nationally, and we're not there, right? I think we're still quite a bit higher there. So we don't see it. Now, are we seeing it or are we not seeing it? And maybe more interestingly, are producers making the right, making the wrong decisions? And we'll hear about that from the panel. So I want to point out that how long cows stay in herds should not be our objective necessarily. Okay, if you listen to real economists, they would say, well, you want to maximize profitability per unit of most limiting factor. And a reasonable metric for that is profitability per cow per year. The time unit is critical here. Or if your milking capacity is really the limiting factor on the farm, that would be dollars per milking stall, for example, per year. Or for the Canadians among us, you'd like to maximize profitability of milking per kilograms of fat per year. But not lifetime profit. You don't want to have a cow that just refuses to sort of leave herself, stays for 10 years and does not make a lot of money every day, right? Although when you go to Europe, they're very much of the opinion, at least as I can feel the room when I talk to European audiences, that cows really need to live longer. They all believe they need to live a year longer than they have been doing there. Okay, so, and I will talk about a few arguments in a minute here about some pros and cons of cows, whether they should live longer. So one argument that I've heard, and that made sense actually, that the break-even milk yield to pay for feed cost has increased over time. This is some math I did also the other day. It's all USDA data there. It's a little bit depending on whether you believe break-even milk yield is paying for the average feed intake in the pen. It's a little higher dry matter intake than if, which as we believe, a low-producing cow eats less, right? So if a low-producing cow eats less, her break-even milk yield is also a little bit lower. But the trend of the graph here is that if you go from left to right, cows have to just produce more to pay for her keep, right? And as we all know, we would never milk cows that are not covering variable costs in the long run, okay? So that's one reason why just cows have to get better, because, well, input costs are higher. Another factor is sort of in this graph, and there's a lot of things going on here. So this is days in milk, but I only plotted about 60 days. And this is a predicted 3 or 5 day milk production over time. So this is early lactation, essentially prediction of milk production, okay? And so the question is then, if you look at these low producing cows at the bottom there, do they actually earn to stay in the herd, right? They're obviously making quite a bit of money. They're easily covering their feed cost. But if you look at competition, if you look at this cow is competing for her right to be in the herd because she is a very good team player, she deserves to be there because the other cows are not really better, she should stay. But if she is not a competitive cow, no matter that she pays for herself, economic rules should really say, hey, I need to replace this cow because when I bring in a heifer, my slot per unit of time is making more money. So there's a lot of things included in that decision. One thing that I want to point out is how well are we able to predict the future of that cow once she is in the herd. And I hear producers say, we look at, for example, genetics first, but then if she starts producing milk, we sort of throw the genetics out of the window, and now it's all phenotype. And I think, well, given that our data may not be that strong in the early lactation, maybe we need to rethink that. Maybe there's a lot of things that happened or did not happen when she grew up as a heifer needs to be included in that prediction of what her future productivity will be. And we should do that for all animals in the herd, so we can rank them. And then it actually pays to replace cows, even though they pay for themselves, with heifers. Another part of this is that, of course, our heifers are getting better much faster. So there's a lot of genetic progress on heifers. About $75 PTA per year, about if you look at the math. And so that argues for bringing in more heifers. On the other hand, we'd love to milk a herd of more mature cows because older cows make more milk. So there's these multiple factors that all play in these replacement decisions, but I do think our objective generally ought to be, and which I think it is for most producers, is profitability per slot per year, not just how long can cows live. So just 4 bullet points to sort of get the panel started perhaps as well. Sometimes I hear the term, our cows burn out, right? I don't like to use that word, but is it true or not true that higher producing cows burn out faster, like they can't stay longer? I think a lot of evidence would suggest it's not the case, but I would just want to throw that out here and hear what you might think about that. Clearly, break-even milk yield has increased, so we have to make better animals because they have to pay for the variable cost. I really think there's a lot of opportunity still to think in terms of replacement non-competitive cows. And part of that is having the right heifer supply. If I talk to my large producers in the Southeast, we basically all believe that our replacement rates are primarily driven by how many heifers we are raising. Right? So it starts with breeding decisions, how much sex, how much beef, perhaps some conventional are we using to make the right number of heifers, because that drives much of our replacement decisions. And if you throw it all together, and I know John and I, we've had these discussions, are we valuing productive life in the net merit as well as we can, or is there opportunity to rethink that? And so with these 4 sort of statements for you, I'm concluding here what I had to bring this morning. So thank you.
Thank you. All right, thank you very much, Dr. DeVries. And I'm going to welcome to the stage our panelists for the afternoon. We had asked Dr. DeVries to kind of help set the stage as we transitioned from the new traits and that conversation into a broader discussion we wanted to have with our producer panel here today in Madison. So as we settle in, I'm going to grab a seat with them as well. And we are going to do some introductions, and then we will start the conversation about if we are letting cows live longer, because Dr. DeVries' question was, should we let them live longer? So to get us started, quick introductions of our panelists who are joining us today. On the far left side, or my left side, your right side of the stage, is Chris Science Program and has held previous roles in marketing at various agricultural companies. Kristen enjoys being a Rock County Holstein Junior Advisor, coaching the Rock County Dairy Judging Team, volunteering on the local Dairy Promotion Board, and also serving on the Dairy Farmers of Wisconsin Board, who, if you have not noticed, is providing free milk right outside the building this week. So make sure you get your free milk this week, thanks to DFW. Next to Kristen in the middle of the stage is Eric Grodeget. Eric lives in northeast Wisconsin, where he farms with his wife, Rosario, and his uncle's family at Grodeget Dairy Farm, Inc. This year, the team was named Innovative Dairy Farmer of the Year by the International Dairy Foods Association. Eric and the crew at home like to try new technology and are always looking for new and better and easier ways to dairy. A conversation with Eric makes it clear that he's a cow guy and knows his herd very well, even while managing a large herd of animals. And our final panelist, closest to me here, is Glenn Klein. And Glenn and his wife Lori, together with their sons Chad and Travis, own and operate Y Run Farms, a progressive dairy and crop enterprise in Troy, Pennsylvania. The operation includes 1,200 dairy cows, supported by 1,700 acres of corn, 500 acres of soybeans, and 800 acres of forage. The Klein family has incorporated genomic testing into herd management for the past 13 years, providing a strong foundation for genetic advancement. Over the last 8 years, their focus has expanded to elite genetics, complemented by the use of IVF on select high-ranking heifers. This strategic approach has positioned their herd at the forefront of genetic progress, productivity, and sustainability. And I have to say, it's great to have the three of you on stage with us today. I've had the privilege of working with many of you over the last couple of years and getting to know you at various dairy events, and know you have wonderful farms at home that we get to talk about today. So to get us started, we do have a list of questions that we have prepared as a group to get the conversation going, but of course we are looking for audience participation. So if you have questions you want to ask the producers, again, make sure you're using that Slido app, using that QR code, and we will get them asked of this group. But to get us going, as we think about longevity and keeping cows around longer, what is something that you've recently changed on the farm or an investment that you've made that has resulted in a noticeable impact on your herd's longevity? And I'm going to start with Glenn, closest to me, since you sat there. So Glenn, you're up first.
So I would have to say back in 2011, we started on genomic testing, and boy, that's made a huge difference on our herd. We did expand here 3 years ago now, and we had to buy some animals in, and it's really a significant difference. Our herd person said that it's just way different as far as those cows lasting a lot longer. Our older cows.
Yeah, and when you're genomic testing, what are you looking for in those results?
More so, we use a lot on DWP to try to keep healthier cows around, mastitis traits, lameness traits. We really work on that. So.
Great. Eric?
Better calf management, better facilities, upgrading facilities.
Yeah. With your more frequent trimming schedule, are you catching things earlier? Are you just feeling like the cows have healthier feet? Why are you seeing an impact there?
Yeah, I think they're not overgrown. In our facility, we do have a lot of growth. And when they do get lame, it seems like they're easier to fix.
Okay. Yeah. Wonderful. And then Kristen, we'll toss that question over to you. What's an investment that you've made or a recent change that's impacted longevity?
Sure. So on the cow side, I would say we also recently expanded in the last 2 years. We switched to milking 3 times a day, which we think has really helped our Jersey cows. We also implemented rubber mats in our holding area, which we hope we will see longer lasting cows, especially influencing their mobility and their lameness. And then on the cow side, on the calf side, we have implemented some different tactics there in our protocols, which we'll probably talk about later on, to improve calf health from the start to make a longer lasting cow.
Yeah, and let's talk about it now. We might as well, right? We got to talk about calf health traits earlier today, but both you and Eric are doing some cool work at home when it comes to having a better understanding of your calf health. So Kristen, do you want to tell us more?
Sure. So probably for the last year, we started implementing lung ultrasounding. We ultrasound every calf, whether it be Jersey, Holstein, or beef calf, and they all get an ultrasound score between 3 and 5 weeks of age of 0 to 5. So our veterinarian comes every other week, scores that group of calves, gives them a score, and then if they have a score, we treat them to try to prevent a chronic illness from developing later on. So we try to get a really low lesion rate. It's kind of like calf herd health basically every other week. We really enjoy it. We get a lot of information from it. We really think that it helps us, like I said, prevent those chronic heifers from showing up later on. It helps us know that calves are sick before they're showing like the clinical symptoms.
Yeah, and Eric, are you using it beyond that, or is that kind of matching your practices at home as well?
Pretty similar.
Okay. So let's think about some of those management practices when it comes to longevity. What are strategies that you are leveraging to achieve your goals for replacement protocols and culling rates at home? And we're going to start, Eric, go for it.
Right. Yeah, like the last speaker said, there is a lot of external factors, but in general, I try not to make too many heifers, and then just if the milk plant lets you make more milk, then you can hold them longer. You know, it just makes the culling easier. Instead of culling problem cows, you're culling lower doers. So that would be the, genetically, they're definitely able to stay longer.
Do you have an optimal replacement rate or cull rate that you aim for?
Yeah, I think my goal is 25. Typically, we've been a little over 30, but this past year we got there finally.
Sure. And because you've been expanding, right?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay, and then Glenn, we'll jump to you. What's a management practice?
So I'd say probably just, we've been using beef on dairy to keep to keep our lower production cows using beef. And then we use the IVFs to try to make better heifers of the good ones.
Okay, and your ideal replacement rate is?
We're usually 27.
Okay, wonderful. Kristen, let's go over to you.
As far as like culling goes, again, we've kind of been in expansion mode, so not super aggressive on that side of things. We probably have like a 19% cull rate, something like that. We definitely lean more towards, as per the discussion, we really love older cows, so we do most of our culling more based on reproduction issues and then a drop off in milk production to figure out which ones we're going to cull.
Okay, I'm also gonna help the audio guys out a little bit, Kristen. I'm gonna have you move your microphone up just a little bit. I think it might help everyone hear your responses a little better. Okay, so Glenn, you mentioned beef on dairy. So let's kind of go down that rabbit hole because we did get a question. How does beef on dairy impact your viewpoint on longevity?
I think you get your better animals, especially if you're doing genomics. And then you're taking those animals and multiplying them instead of getting those, what I would say, dud cows that you used to breed Holsteins and have that calf around. Mm-hmm. So now you don't have that. You're eliminating that factor.
The low genetic end.
The low genetic end.
Sure. Okay. Eric, Kristen, you want to tackle that one? No.
I would say similar thoughts. We breed probably 70% to beef right now. And it really, just helps you narrow in on the cows that you want to keep reproducing those high genetic females and let the rest of them make high dollar beef calves.
Yeah, so we've got our ideal replacement rates that we're shooting for. I guess, Kristen, we missed what yours was, sorry.
I don't have a good number.
You don't have a good number, that's fair. If you could have a cow that could live as long as she wanted to stay, how long would you like to be able to keep cows around?
6, 7 lactations, if they're profitable.
Yep.
I mean, you're always going to weed them top cows out because you have something better coming in. So if you're in an expansion mode, you're going to keep them around. If you're not in an expansion mode, you might not.
I would.
Similar thing, 5th or 6th lactation seems like we still can keep pretty healthy. Hopefully in the future can make it longer, but we end up with more issues once they get 7th, 8th lactation currently.
Yeah, I would say I would like to keep cows as long as possible. Like we said, I love old cows, but ideally once they get to that 6th lactation, then you're like, okay, you've reached what I would like you to be at, and from now on you can just live out your days.
Yeah, absolutely. So when we think about breeding for longevity and trying to get that cow herd to be more mature, how are you selecting in your reproductive and genetics programs to make that happen?
So I'm assuming productive life, but like beyond that, or what are you considering? And we'll start, Eric.
I usually use like index first, and then I try to make sure there's no bad traits in, linear reproduction, milk quality, or and then high production. That seems to make a cow that's good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Kristen?
As far as like selecting for genetic traits with the jerseys, we do focus a little bit on some type traits just because we think that influences how long they're going to last. We tend to focus on udder depth, rear udder height. We think that those attachments and udder depth really help our cows live longer. They're easier to manage than longer in the barn. We look at CCR. We do also focus on something my husband has really honed on is breeding for strength, especially in our Jersey calves. We like to see a lot of strength, especially when they're in with these beef calves right now. So we want them to be able to compete right alongside them, be competitive at the bunk. So we do focus on strength as well.
Okay, and then Glenn, what's on your list?
So what I'm looking for is I use a bunch of the we have DWP, ICC, and net merit. I use some. I don't use as much probably as I should, but I don't. And try to compare them, and then try to pick out the bulls that I'm interested in, so we're not picking the wrong ones. But trying to get the best genetics all the time.
Absolutely. So there's a 70% usage of beef semen happening right now across the country. Are you concerned about a national shortage of heifers as a result of that? Whoever wants to tackle that question, it's a wild card here coming in from the audience.
I think just that the cull rates are in general just going to become normal. I think 25% will probably be normal just because it has to be, but then you'll manage to make the heifers enough. And you might increase, go to 65% beef or a little change in the herd, but I don't see a big change in the near future.
Okay.
I think as far as farmers go, they always pick or find a way to solve a problem, and whether it's beef calves, heifers, all that things, we always find a solution.
Yeah. Speaking of solutions, let's go off of this for a second here. We were talking beforehand about future traits and future things that might help solve problems. So what are some of the solutions that we need to discover still to solve problems that exist today, or problems you see on the horizon? And we can look beyond longevity even, just like the cow in general. How do we make her better? How do we make her more profitable? I've given you guys some time to think about this one, so I'm hoping somebody's got a good answer for me this morning.
Somatic cell, lameness. Lameness is huge. I mean, what do we get rid of cows for? Breeding and lameness, and mastitis. Those three things are our main points. So we have to focus on them. If we don't, we're not going to get cows to live longer.
Similar as him also, the breeding and milk quality, we've had data for a long time. The lameness and calf health has been, newer, not a lot of data. Have to look in DWP, Canadian, or Europe. So now we should be able to select it heavily. Other traits, beef value on beef calves. So if you work on like heifer feed efficiency, that should translate into beef calf feed efficiency. That, and then, beef value on cows when you cull them.
Yeah, I would say I really enjoy the discussion with calf health traits. I do think that's super important because I think they are obviously the future of the herd. I think there's a lot of data to be collected on calves. Like I said, we're doing the lung scoring. There's a lot of farms doing total proteins on every single calf. I think there's a lot that can be, a lot of data that can be gathered about calves and tell us more information even sooner, right, than waiting till when they're a lactating animal. Other thing, just along Jersey lines, I guess, would like to see some more genetic progress. I feel like Holsteins are just really hammering in on that feed efficiency and really making some progress towards where Jerseys are at. So maybe, Jerseys are the smaller cow, but maybe they do need to just be a little bit bigger to increase that feed intake and make them even more productive than they already are.
Yeah. We love to see the Jerseys also gain new traits, right, and add those as they go. Sometimes it's a little hard with the population size difference, but it's great to see committed Jersey breeders like yourself wanting to see those changes happen as well. Let's think about the questions that Albert posed to us as we were getting on the stage. If you were reading the slides or not, maybe you were distracted because you were about to walk onto a stage. But one of them was about whether we're burning cows out. And he said he doesn't like that term, but we'll use it for the sake of this. Do you feel like your cows are getting to that point that's why they're leaving, because you've burnt them out, you've used up everything that's in them, and it's just time for them to go? Or do you feel like you're sending a cow that just doesn't meet the criteria to stay in the farm anymore?
I think in our situation where we were growing, we didn't really burn cows out, but cows that we bought in, you could really tell a difference. Those cows were just, they didn't last as long as our home cows that were bred for years of our own breeding. So, and that was not just something that we seen it in our herd, but our herds person that she just came in 3 years ago, and she says, man, I can tell a difference just by the cows that you guys bred earlier on to the ones we bought in. So it's huge.
And then how are you managing that transition from those low genetic value animals to elevating your whole milking herd potential?
Beef.
Okay.
Beef on dairy. I mean, those cows there, we just don't breed back to Holsteins.
Sure. They're making milk for the time being. Okay.
Yep.
Eric, Kristen?
Then in our situation, 15 to 25 years ago, it seemed like I was selling cows every day for, a lame cow, a mastitis cow, a pneumonia cow, something all the time. Where now most cows are Monday afternoon. You might have one or two here and there throughout the week, but it's kind of, so you don't have the burnt out and they have to go now.
Yep, I would agree. I don't feel like when we're sending cull cows, it's not the older cows that are burnt out, and I really hate that term, but I wouldn't say it's the cows that are burnt out. I would say it's more those cows that have dropped off reproductively, and we've let them kind of hang out and keep producing milk, but then as soon as they drop in that milk production, that's when they reach our cull cow list. I think if we're using management tools correctly and really looking at some different traits when we're breeding, I don't think we should be burning cows out. They should be able to live productive lives and healthy lives until they naturally kind of reach that dip in milk production.
Yeah. And so if we think about the management side of our dairies beyond the genetics that we like to talk about here in this space, what's a management tool that you'd like to add in the future for better profitability, more longevity in your animals? What's kind of on the horizon for your next investment?
For me, I think probably automatic lameness detection. Now we do a lot of, me or one of the hoof trimmers check every cow, and then the shift leader and the parlor and cow mover try to detect them, but you still miss them.
Okay, so you're looking for one of those camera systems that can help with lameness detection.
Yeah.
Okay. Kristen, Glenn?
I would say probably more implementing stuff for mobility and lameness. I would agree. We just did the rubber mats in our holding area, and we would look to extend that into the rest of the barn, primarily probably starting with the older cow pen and then going from there. I think that would come top to mind.
Yeah.
That's kind of where we're at too with the lameness thing. I mean, we had one, but something happened to it, so I'm not positive what
Okay, we just got a question. Let's do what is the average lactation in your herd, and are you happy with it?
Ours is right around 4.2, I think, when I looked at Dairy Comp last night. which I admittedly probably is younger than we'd like to see because we just expanded, right? So we had a lot of springers. We have a lot of first and second lactation cows. So happy with 4.2 now, yes, but would definitely like to see it closer to the 5 and 6 lactation range in the future.
Yeah, we're about 3.3, 3.4. I'd like probably one more lactation would be the goal.
And that's exactly where we're at too.
How do you get there?
Breeding.
Yeah, breeding and slow management improvements, I think, kind of the combination.
The other day when we were planning our meeting to get ready for this, Eric, you had a meeting with your milkers. So let's talk about like the people side of managing cows and keeping these cows around longer. What are some ways that you work with your employee team to make sure that cows are being managed well, data is being collected correctly, that things that make a difference from an employee side in our managing of dairy cows?
Yeah, so our milkers meeting would have been over, and we didn't have one for a little while, but it was just quick update. You know, the milking routine is good. Just let them know how we're doing. We mentioned we do have a camera that monitors our barn, so we can see when the cows leave the pen and when they go back. So cow movers, as we've added about 300 to 400 cows in the last year, we have to make sure they don't try to bring the pen too early, just so that technology reads the lie down time per pen. So 2 pens were getting under 12 hours and the rest were longer. And one was after the fresh pen, and the fresh pen now is bigger. So now we have to take that pen 10 minutes later, 3 times a day. You know, just then that 30 minutes you're not standing. Those kind of things. Yeah, stockmanship is always hard to train, but I always think they're really bad stockmanship people, but when you look at them, I always get a little bothered, oh, you should do this or that, but we always improve the stockmanship and, you know, moving them slow, fresh cows entering parlor, those types of things.
Yeah. Kristen, Glenn, from a people perspective?
I would say, for more background knowledge, we started our dairy in 2017 and then we expanded in 2023. So it's been a fast-moving vehicle, a lot of flying by the seat of our pants. Last year at one point we kind of realized a lot of our staff was jack of all trades but master of none. So it was, how do we get people more specialized in certain areas? How do we keep them there? How do we better manage their time? We hired a herds person this last year and she's been fantastic. And then we've also focused in on some calving pen protocols, because not only are like the calves the future of your herd, but we all know that, you know, a good lactation starts off with a good transition period of getting that calf out healthy, but then also keeping the cow healthy. So focusing in on protocols for that, and making sure that everyone is recording everything properly, etc.
So I'm going to come from a different perspective a little bit because I'm a little older. I have a next generation coming in, and so it's been a challenge for me, being that I was always the cow person. So it's a challenge for me. So
how do you work through some of that?
Through other people helping us.
Okay.
That's the biggest thing, and yeah.
And now you get to take fun trips. This is Glenn's first trip to World Dairy Expo, everyone, so we're happy to have him here. Okay, so let's think long-term, sorry, I'm actually gonna switch this way. We've been talking about new traits all morning, right? So we've covered calf health, the new milking speed that came out in August, the changes to female fertility, the future of hoof health and mobility. There's a lot coming, and then John talked about some of the research projects that are ongoing. But as we implement new traits into the system, how long does it take for you as breeders and producers to start putting them into your programs, that we can see a difference in the cow herd from this new information?
I would say right away we do. I mean, we don't mess around with it. Just like when genomics came out, we started right on it. And I'm not afraid to take chances. And I don't think it's really a chance when they come out with new traits. So.
Yeah, for me, most of the time, right away. Depends on the trait a little bit if you think it's good for your herd or valuable. But yeah, then a couple new ones we're discussing are all ones I would use right away.
Okay. I would say similar, and maybe not breeding specifically for that trait, but it's recognizing that it's there and then like avoiding the extremes.
Yeah. How soon do you want them included in like an index of some sort? So that's how most of you guys you are breeding off of indexes, correct? Yeah.
And I think as long as they're introduced at a low level and know they're correct, then it's hard to put up. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff in indexes already, so I won't do much. But at least it's not that trait should advance just because of the index instead of maybe maintaining or going backwards.
We talk a lot about if there's too many traits in the indexes because we know the list gets long and some traits or indexes have been simplified over the years, but it's always an interesting and lively discussion when the group gets going about whether there's too many traits or not enough traits yet in the index and how we manage that. And I'm sure John would have some comments. If anybody wants to have that discussion with him, I will stay out of that one. But I think that is where we are going to wrap up our conversation, y'all. Unless you have some closing thoughts, I will give you each a few seconds here. If you have anything you'd like to share as some final closing thoughts on our conversation today.
I don't have anything.
Not at all.
I did like at the end there when you mentioned about indexes, like a lot of people wonder, is there too many traits? But I think it's all part of the farming perspective, right? Like so many of us have so many different dairy farms. We all have different preferences. And we have these great new technologies and tools that let you filter for what traits you want and what you want to look at. So why not leave them there as long as the data is there? Everyone farms and manages differently.
Yeah, that's a great way to end this, Kristen. I like it. Okay, that is perfect. Well, I appreciate you all taking some time to sit on this stage with me. Glenn, to be here in Wisconsin and experience Madison and Expo for the first time, and both of you taking time away from, or all of you taking time away from your farms to be here with us today. So let's give our producer panel a big round of applause. All right, and you all are free to exit the stage. And as they do so, I'm going to invite Joao back up to the stage for our closing comments and remarks. I think he's got a list to get through here, but hopefully you all have been enjoying our meeting this morning. You've learned a few things. Again, the recordings are available on the YouTube channel, and the presentation decks will also be available as we wrap up with our meeting. So, Joao, I will give the conclusion remarks off to you.
Thank you, Katie. Thank you for our panelists for this very interesting discussion. And this is always, I actually did my PhD thesis on longevity, and I'm always puzzled how come we are making so much progress in the genetic side, but not in the phenotypic side. So this is a very interesting discussion to me. First thing we would like to do is to thank our retiring member of the board. So please, Katie Olson, come here. So Katie has served as our board member for 2 terms, and her term landed this year in April. And we would like to express our gratitude, and then Jay Weicker will hand a plaque that expresses that. Thank you very much, Katie. It has been really a pleasure to work with you, and, well, continue to work now, just in different terms. Thank you very much. I also would like to acknowledge here the retiring committee members. So we had 5 members of our producer advisory committee retiring this year because they completed the 3 consecutive terms, or they just simply left the committee. So Spencer Hackett, I saw him earlier today, Tom Castell, David Lawrence, Mary Sam Smith, and Guy Vogel. Thank you very much. Your input in this producer advisory committee has been extremely valuable. Our confidence on the way we see the proposals that we have in our hands has increased a lot since we have this committee helping us to go through that. Also, would like to thank two giants that have retired, and as retiring in their careers, they also retired from our committees. The first one is Tom Lawler, that retired from Holstein Association, and Tom has been a long-time collaborator with CDCB and the industry. He has been part of several task forces, and more specifically from the Genetic Evaluation Methods Group, and also the Dairy Evaluation Review team. And Tom was always a person that was actively involved in interbull activities as well. So his contribution to this industry has been tremendous. So we thank Tom for his contribution and wish him a very successful retirement period. Likewise, Paul Van Reyden. I mean, what to say about Paul? Paul basically has been a mentor of the genetic evaluation system over the past decades, together with his colleagues at Agile. He retired, and he also left committees, and he also was the Agile liaison with the CDCB board. So we really feel a lot Paul not being around anymore. It was kind of part of the system forever. But that was recognized when Paul and George Wiggins this week received the Pioneer Award from Dairy Shrine. So I just wanted to say again, this was really important for us to see the recognition from the industry coming to these two fellows that have basically built the system that we use today, and we have a job because of what they did. So thank you very much, and Paul is not here, but George is, so congratulations again, George. So also we would like to have a special thanks to our panelists and speakers. You did an excellent job today, and I think everybody that had the opportunity to participate will take something valuable from your interventions here. We would like to thank the World Dairy Expo for hosting us here. This has been really our home for 11 years now, and we hope that we will continue for many more years to come. Dairy producers, you are the reason why we are here. We are the reason why we do what we do. And we try to not forget that every day when we wake up. Our collaborators, and you know who you are, in which condition you collaborate, in which way you participate in the system. Thank you very much for the support. Member sectors that are represented in our board, you have created this operation, and we are just trying to be fair to your vision and keep this going. The CDCB board itself, and we have many of our members here. If you have the opportunity to compliment them, because they are really donating a lot of their time and their wisdom to make this organization successful. And the CDCB staff. And I will choose Katie Schmidt to represent all the staff that is here and has been participating here, because Katie put her leadership once again in front of this program. With that, I would like to thank you all for coming, for all of those that are online too, to be with us today, and see you next year. Thank you.
All right, thank you all. Just a quick note, if you are a speaker today, please come to the stage for a photo. But again, thank you all for attending the 11th annual industry meeting for CDCB here at World Dairy Expo.